Good morning, everyone. I'm just declaring the Committee for Communities meeting Thursday the 4th of November.
Sorry, apologies.
Sorry. The Committee for Communities meeting is open to the public. Welcome to the meeting. We are expecting a few more members to make an appearance this morning, but we want to get started quickly. The following members are present in person: myself, the Vice Chair Kelly Armstrong, and Andy Allen, MLA, and the following members are on Starleaf: Paula Bradley, our Chairperson, and Ciara Ferguson. We'll update that attendance as others join us. Just to remind everyone, agenda item 1, declarations of interests. Members, you have the requirement to declare any interest you may have in relation to items under discussion today. If you don't declare it now, we can get to that. Andy?
Charity Trustee, Chair.
Charity Trustee, thank you, Andy. We'll move straight on to agenda item 2. Today we have a ministerial briefing on the support for mortgage interest bill. Member, there's a departmental letter on this in your tabled papers. If you want to turn to your tabled pack, there's a letter there on page 3. I'd like to welcome Minister Deirdre Hargey. I believe we have Una McConnell. I don't see Hayley Ward, Rona McGinley. There's a few others there, but I'm sure...
Sorry, Hayley is unavailable today, so Anne McCleary will be attending.
Thank you so much. So Anne McCleary's there.
I am here. I'm just not sure if my IT is causing difficulties again.
No, we're hearing you loud and clear today.
That's fine. Okay, great. Thanks.
Minister, before we get started, just on behalf of the committee, I need to highlight something in relation to the committee's consideration of the Charities Bill. After our meeting on the 21st of October, the committee wrote to the department and asked for a quick answer to queries and proposals raised at that meeting. We've now been informed that a response will not be forthcoming until next week's meeting, or until after this week's meeting, and therefore the planned deliberation sessions with officials today at today's meeting will not now take place. It's just we want to put on record the committee's dissatisfaction with this situation. As you know, we're under huge time pressures to scrutinise 3 bills, and I know you're here today asking members to facilitate a 4th bill, the Support for Mortgage Interest Bill. However, we can't progress these bills at the speed needed and with as much scrutiny as possible if responses from the department to queries and potential agreement to amendment proposals are not coming back to us in a timely fashion. We're just putting that in the record, and we'd ask, Minister, if you could assist us by asking officials if they could pass on that information to us as quickly as possible, please. But I'll not hold you back, Minister, because I appreciate your Thursdays are very precious. So if you want to update us then on the Support for Mortgage Interest, etc., Security for Loans Bill, please.
Yeah, I think just to answer the first one, Vice Chair, if that's okay. So, I mean, I completely understand the frustration of the committee. And I suppose on behalf of the department, apologies in terms of the delay, because I know you are working with me and our staff team in terms of progressing the legislation, and obviously we take that role seriously. This isn't a normal run of practice for the team or myself, Vice Chair, and I hope you acknowledge that. Obviously the bill is complex. I know that there's been some recommended amendments, and I suppose my team wanted to just check the legal advice around some of that. So I do apologise for the delay. I don't make any excuses for it. And I am currently looking at the recommendations that have been put to the committee, and I will have a response to you next week. So again, just to put that on record as well, but completely acknowledge the frustration of the committee, and make sure that I look at that internally as well. So I just want to put that, Kelly, as well. Sorry.
No, thank you.
In terms of the opportunity, I mean, thanks again, committee, for the opportunity to come and speak on this important piece of legislation. Obviously, by way of background, on the 23rd of September, the Executive agreed the policy around this. I then brought the bill back in its draft form on the 21st of October. And again, the Executive agreed to the introduction of the bill into the Assembly through the expedited committee consideration of the bill. And obviously the Support for Mortgage Interest Security of Loans Bill gives the Department the powers to make regulations to enable a statutory charge to be registrable against a support for mortgage loan. Homeowners, I suppose, on qualifying social security benefits can get help towards mortgage interest payments with the support for mortgage interest loan, and the primary purpose of that is to protect the owner-occupier. who are receiving an income-related benefit from the threat of repossession. And in April 2018, the support for mortgage interest changed from a benefit to an interest-bearing loan. The loan is only recoverable from any equity of the sale or transfer of the ownership or property, so it's not recoverable through any other means, only through the equity. And if there is sufficient equity to repay the total of the loan, if there isn't, the department will write off any amount that can't be repaid. The differences, I suppose, in land law between Britain and here means that obtaining a similar level of security to protect the recovery of loans is difficult. And this is because it's only practical to secure loans when the property is registered and appears to be on the title register in the land registry. So my staff team have been working and have placed charges on properties that are unregistered through the Registry of Deeds, and have currently secured 156 loans using this method. However, the process of placing and removing a charge in these cases is cumbersome and can require action to be taken by the Departmental Solicitor's Office. Also, for a legal charge to be placed on the registered or unregistered property, all legal owners must be included in the person's benefit claim. And at present, the legislation allows for a legal charge to be placed on properties where a loan under Article 13 has been paid. However, legal charges can only be placed against registered properties. So currently where we're sitting, there are 541 loans out of 1,409 outstanding loans, are loans which don't have the security of the legal charge, and therefore those tenants could be at risk of repossession if anything went wrong. And at a current average of 5,000 per loan, approximately then that would mean around 2.7 million worth of loans are unsecured and no secure method to consider if recovery is possible. The remaining 868 loan recipients with a legal charge are not being treated equally to the 541 unsecured loan recipients, and this could result in a legal challenge. So I suppose that's one of the main reasons as well coming forward. And again, using a statutory charge will provide a method of security to allow my department to consider the recovery of all loans, provided there are available funds from the sale of the transfer of the or the transfer of the property, as a statutory charge can be placed against registered and unregistered properties, irrespective of the makeup of the benefit as well. And I suppose just to add to that, the statutory charge is actually paid by the department as well, so we do pay that. The Attorney General has obviously looked at this, and she believes that the bill does have legislative competency, and therefore that it's been approved in terms of equality, rural and human rights screening, and that work has been undertaken. I suppose once the charge to primary legislation is commenced and subordinate legislation is amended, all new loans will be registered on the statutory charge register. The unsecured loans will be registered in tranches, and that's to ensure that resources in both my department and also Land Registry can be managed. My staff team have been in contact with Land Registry and will maintain that contact as the bill progresses. So just to ensure that if we do get this through in the mandate, that they can start taking those tranches as soon as possible. Obviously, officials will also bring forward subordinate legislation to enable loan recipients to defer the recovery of the loan and allow the loan transfer to another property. And that means that a loan recipient can use all of the equity of their property to help with purchasing their next home. And this provides greater opportunity for people as their circumstances change to move to a property that better suits their need. I suppose I have requested expedited committee consideration, and that's really due to the limited time left in the mandate, the number of bills obviously that you've highlighted at the start that yourselves as a committee are scrutinising, but also that the substantial risk that this bill could fall if it was to go through the normal passage, and therefore I am seeking your support for expedited committee stage. I am aware of the heavy workload, Vice Chair, that you had spoke about earlier. and I value the role of the committee scrutinising. Obviously, it does make for better legislation, and we've seen that in other bills. But I suppose the urgency around this is the amount of those unsecured loans that are there at the moment, and therefore I would ask for that expedited committee stage. As you said at the start, we have Una McConnell and Anne McCleary on as well, and if there's any, I suppose, technical questions as well, Vice Chair, they would be happy to respond in terms of the detail around that also. So just again, thanks very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Minister. Much appreciated. I'll just say to the other members, just to confirm that Paul Frew and Mark Durkin have joined us on Starleaf, and Anya Murphy has joined us in the room. Folks, if anybody wants to ask a question from the Minister, please raise your hand, or in the room or online. Minister, can I just confirm something just for clarification with regards to this bill? Obviously, we'll go through the processes and we'll discuss what the committee can do with regards to our scrutiny stage, but I just wanted to check, the bill does mention if someone goes into default and say their house is repossessed, does this bill cover you that the loan amount can be deducted from the sale, say if a bank has to sell that house then? That it does mean the department can get that back. That part isn't written off?
It's only if there's equity left in the property, so it would be after the bank has taken everything they are due, we would take what we get. So yes, it can cover us if there's equity left in the property.
So it's only if equity is left? Okay.
Yes, we won't be taking any money if there's no equity in the property.
Okay. And how do you know if there's no equity left in the property? It's just I'm very aware of banks doing repossessions and then going to auction to sell properties that happen to be below then market value.
Well, I suppose that would be, I'm not really sure. I suppose it would be up to our solicitors who are working on that to make sure that they release the statutory charge on the property, and if there's any equity we would receive it. I'd have to come back to you on exactly how that would work in repossession cases, if that's okay.
Yeah, please, because that's one of the issues that I would have with the bill, and that's why the scrutiny part, I know we're going to try our best with this, but it's one of those things that we just need to be clear on, because I am very aware that in an auction situation, houses don't necessarily meet the full, amount that's needed even to cover mortgages. So yeah. If it doesn't meet the amount to cover the mortgage, we'd have to just write off the SMI loan, because obviously there wouldn't be enough then to pay. There wouldn't be any equity left. Yeah, but if a bank held on a wee bit longer and didn't go for auction and actually sold it through the market process, then there would be. It's just quick sales, concerned about that. So that we can force banks to ensure that they do enable the amount of loan to be repaid to be able to be recovered, if you know what I mean. Yeah. Anybody else have any questions on this, folks? I'm not seeing any hands raised, Minister. You've maybe explained it so well to us all. Oh, sorry, there is. Mark Durkin has raised his hand. Mark. To bring Mark in, please. Sorry.
Thank you, Deputy Chair, and thanks to the Minister for coming along and explaining that, or trying to explain it, doing a good job of explaining what is, it seems, pretty complex. And just to echo your own words there, or thoughts, Kelly, in terms of the importance of us getting some scrutiny of this, I can understand, I do understand and accept the need for speed here, and I'm interested in terms of that expedited committee stage. I think we do need to understand more. We know how this will protect the department and public finance, but in terms of impact on people, has there been much thought given to that at all, Minister?
I think in terms of, Mark, I know Una will come in a second, but part of this is with, I suppose, residents or tenants that own homes. When they're not unprotected, there could be the risk then around repossession. There is the risk then in terms of the inequality, where some do have the charge and some don't, in terms of the properties and the figures that we did give out there. I'm not sure, Una, sorry, did you want to come in with some more?
I was just going to say, that this isn't really changing the policy of SMI. It's really just an amendment to make sure that there's a charge we put in everybody's property. The department seeks to recover the loan anyway. It just makes it easier for the department to recover it, and it's fair because everybody will have a charge on their property. And in addition, putting a statutory charge on the property means then that we can progress with the beneficial amendment to support for mortgage interest loan, following the bill being made that allow people to transfer their loan to another property, rather than at the minute, if maybe your family grew bigger or you had a disability and you needed to move property, you would have to pay back your loan from the equity and then take out another loan, whereas this means you can maybe use all your equity to move to another property. So, you know, most people won't notice any difference, but there is some benefits that come out of making this loan. Is that clear enough?
It's clearer. In terms of, I suppose, the active loans, if you want to call them that, or people who are already gone down this route, what sort of exposure is there to the department at this point, or can this be applied retrospectively to existing loans as well?
Yes, it can be provided. We can put a charge on existing loans that don't have a charge on them. So any loan that currently has a legal charge on it, we're just going to leave it as a legal charge. It'll just be new loans going forward, and any loans that aren't secured at the minute, we can go back and put a statutory charge on the property. Now, this shouldn't be a problem for tenants because they've already agreed to have a charge when they signed the loan agreement. It's just we haven't been able to put the charge on the property. And we pay to put the admin charge on the property, so there's no cost to the tenant or the homeowner for this. So they've already agreed to it, so it should be fine.
Okay, thanks, Una. Thank you, Minister.
I'm just checking here, Minister, to see if anybody else has raised their hands on this one. I'm not seeing anybody else in the room or online. My goodness, you have explained it well. Thank you very much, Minister. At this stage, unless there's anything else you want to bring up with the committee now that you have us, if you have a few moments, if not, we can let you get on with your probably an executive meeting.
Yeah, we'll have an executive meeting this morning. Thank you. And just to reiterate from the start around the charities, I am actively looking at that at the moment, so I will have that returned to you just with my consideration of your proposed amendments, so I'll make sure that that's prior.
That would be much appreciated, Minister, because if we want to be able to get to this bill as quickly as possible, we will need to move on those that we have that public consultation completed with. So all I'd say at this stage then is, Minister, thank you very much. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you for providing us with an update.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
We'll close session now.
Members, just because we've just had sight of that piece of legislation and information, we're going to move to closed session, if that's okay, just because we would need to hear from the Bills Office just very quickly of how we can proceed with this. All right. So, members content that I move to closed session?
Yep. Claire McCanney's coming in.
Members, we're back in open session now. And thank you very much for that discussion. So we're moving now to agenda item 3, which is apologies. Members, are we aware of any apologies for today's meeting? I'm not aware of any, I don't think. Stephen Dunn, sorry, has sent in apologies. Thank you very much, Stephen. But I don't think we have anyone else. Okay. Moving on then to agenda item 4, draft minutes. Members, the draft minutes from the meeting on the 21st of October 2021 are at page 7 of your pack. Can I ask members, are you content to agree the minutes of the 21st of October as drafted? Let me hear a yes, please. Agreed, thank you. Moving on then to agenda item 5, chairperson's business. Our chair is not well at the moment, so I think that we can move on then from that, and we'll pick up with Paula at hopefully our next meeting when she's feeling better. Agenda item 6 then, matters arising. Members, just to draw your attention, you provided at page 19 with a response from the Northern Ireland Housing Executive Board in relation to leasehold properties. Development of the new leasehold extension policy and procedures for existing leaseholders is currently in progress and includes proposals to facilitate applications from leaseholders to extend their unexpired leasehold term to 125 years at a premium payable by the leaseholder. The potential to apply for leasehold extension is not a statutory right, and the basis on which it will operate is currently under consideration. The development of the new policy is currently at an advanced stage. It was originally anticipated that the exercise would be complete by December 21. However, a number of additional legal issues have emerged that require resolution. A timescale for completion cannot therefore be provided at this stage, but the Housing Executive is working to complete the exercise at the earliest opportunity. Members, have you any comments, or are you content to note that response? Andy.
I understand the pressures and the complexities of this, Chair, but I'm not happy, again, with this response. I do know that this has been sitting for some time, and meanwhile individuals impacted by this are locked in, really. They can't do anything, and they're facing the struggles of assault, and I don't think, I don't say this lightly, I don't think it's being treated with the urgency that it deserves.
Okay. What can we then do with that then? Do you want us to write back to the Housing Executive to ask them to, or use this word, expedite, it seems to be the word of the day, expedite the process, or to give us a timeline? Would that be worthwhile?
I would be much happier if I had a definitive timeline. I appreciate they're saying that they can't give that at this stage due to the complexities and the other legal issues that have arisen, but I think those who are impacted by this at least deserve a definitive timeline. I think obviously it's moved to the right on a number of occasions, so a much more definitive timeline would be much more helpful.
We'll write back to the Chair of the Housing Executive then, thanking him for his response, but asking, we appreciate that they're working through processes, but we'd appreciate a timeline, because this has gone on for a bit of a time. Okay. No other members have indicated. I'll move on then to agenda item 7, which is the Capita briefing on the renewal of the contract for PIP assessments. This is in your tabled papers, members, and it's at page 15 in your tabled papers. We will be welcoming Anthony King, Managing Director of Client Partner Health and Welfare, Hugh Williams, Managing Director of Capital PIP, Laura Erskine, Clinical Director for Health and Welfare. So we have all of you here. Thank you very much for coming along. Anthony, I understand you'll make a very brief opening statement and then hand over to your colleagues for some more detail, and then we'll move into questions. Members, I'd like to highlight at this point that Capita are not able to discuss any individual cases that we may be aware of or have concerns about in this meeting, but they have offered to separately assist any member who wishes to investigate a particular case. So just with that clarification, Anthony, I'll hand over to yourself. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair and committee members. Can I just double check that you can hear us okay before I proceed?
We can, yes.
Well, thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to make an opening statement. I'm going to make some introductory remarks, and I'm going to hand about the role that Capita plays on PIP. Sorry, can you hear us okay?
We had a bit of a blip there, so we did, but hopefully the camera and it will hold up for us. Carry on, Anthony.
Okay, sorry, apologies for choice of technology. Before I continue, I'm just going to give a little bit of background, if that would be helpful, on the roles that we all play in Capita. So I lead Capita's health and welfare sector, which means I have overall responsibility for all the work that we do in those areas, and that includes PIP in Great Britain, and also the PIP work that we do in Northern Ireland. And then to my right here, I've got Laura Erskine. Laura is our Clinical Director for Health and Welfare, and that means she takes a leading role in all things clinical governance, clinical quality and clinical training. And Laura has been involved with our PIP contracts since 2013. And then to my left, I've got Hugh Williams, and Hugh has day-to-day responsibility for delivering PIP, again, for the PIPs that we're responsible for in Great Britain and also here in Northern Ireland. I'd also like to say thank you to Belfast today to talk to you.
We're having a bit of a breakdown, Anthony.
And we'd be more than welcome and more than happy. We'd be more than happy to do this on a more regular basis if that would be something that you'd be interested in pursuing. And likewise, we'd be very happy to invite you all as committee members to come and visit us to raise any specific concerns you've got or to meet our staff. That work is a standing invitation for you all. PIP supports some of the most vulnerable people in our society, and at Capita we're acutely aware of the responsibility that comes with the work that we do in that process. And we care about the people we see, and over the years we've built up a large amount of expertise and experience for the work that we do. And just to throw a couple of statistics at you, Since 2013, we've completed well over 1 million PIP assessments, and that includes around about 270,000 now here in Northern Ireland. They typically come to us from the NHS, and they bring their wealth of clinical experience and compassion to their role. And then on top of that, we give them specialist training for the role of a disability assessor, which is subtly different to the work that they completed in the NHS. And PIP is a complicated scheme, and we understand it can be stressful and traumatic for people who are going through the application process. Recognising this, what we do is monitor and measure across a whole range of areas, and we have lots of checks and balances in the system. And a lot of those metrics are published on a regular basis by the Department for who we touch. They have a high quality and empathetic experience. However, we do know that our people have to make judgments every day. Those are clinical judgments and also non-clinical judgments. And we don't always get things right. Now, often when things go wrong, we can correct them very quickly with limited impact. But in a small number of cases, when things go wrong, it can have very serious consequences for people and their families. And obviously, all the very serious cases I'm fully aware of, and they can be deeply, deeply upsetting. So I just want to take the opportunity today in public to say to anybody who've had a poor experience with Capita, that we've let down, that we are sorry. We do aspire to some very high standards, and that we don't always meet them, and I'd like to apologise to anybody that we've let down. And I know you may have some cases that you want to talk about today in this committee hearing. It may not be appropriate, or we may simply not have the information to be able to do that. But I would be very, very happy to look into those cases separately outside the committee and provide a full written report to you afterwards. So please do let me know if that would be something you'd like to take on. So whilst the vast majority of people do have a positive experience with Capita on PIP, we are still committed to continuous improvement. And those improvements come from a number of sources. We still maintain very good relationships with the disability stakeholder groups, and their feedback can be really helpful. There have been a number of independent reviews of PIP, and those reviews have made some step changes in the quality of the PIP process. We work with the department regularly on ongoing improvements, and also our staff who are delivering the services day to day make suggestions all the time that we can just incorporate, and that's something we do as just business as usual. Recent examples of where we've made improvements include additional channels to allow people to have assessments for PIP that aren't just face-to-face. So people can now have assessments over the telephone or indeed over a video link. And we think that's really important because it does take some of the stress out of the process. We've also introduced the ability for people to request their assessment to be recorded. And that too is really important because those recordings are then accessible to all the people who go through the process. And that builds confidence that what they say is accurately reflected in the reports that we write. And another key area for improvement that we enhance as an ongoing basis is in our clinical training. And in particular, we keep introducing new training modules for specific mental health conditions. And given the rising prevalence of mental health issues, we think that's really important. For us over the years has been in the area of gaining further evidence to help support our PIP assessments. And that evidence can come from the NHS or other sources, but it has been difficult to obtain it in a timely manner and in a format that we can use. And we have made some improvements in that area over the years, but as I say, it remains an issue. And that's why we really genuinely welcome the recommendations in the recent Ombudsman's report around further evidence. We think the focus that this report is going to put back on to further evidence in PIP will be a real step change in getting some real changes in an area that involves multiple parties and is quite complicated. And as you're aware, we're working closely with the department on those recommendations, and the department is committed to reporting back on progress by the end of the year. And finally, before I hand over to Hugh here to talk a little bit more about PIP, I'd just like to say that we as individuals know family and friends who are reliant on the support that PIP provides. And whilst we're here today representing Capita, I'd also like to give our personal assurances as well as our assurances from Capita that we are committed to treating everybody that we touch on PIP with the dignity and the professionalism and the compassion that they deserve. So I'm now going to hand over to Hugh, and Hugh's going to just describe a little bit more detail about the actual part that Capita plays in the end-to-end PIP process.
Good morning. I thought it was useful really to take you through the whole journey, just so we can understand where responsibilities and where handoffs are, and hopefully clarify our role in the process. The end-to-end journey for an individual applying for PIP is owned by the Department for Communities, as you're aware. We play a role in that, albeit a fairly large role, but within the overall process that they retain. Now, when an individual first decides that they might be eligible or wish to make a claim, they apply for that to the department. And with that initial application, they add in any evidence they might have. They also complete a questionnaire that says how they feel that their disability may impact on their daily living and mobility. That all goes to the Department for Communities. They gather that initial evidence together and have an initial review of what that looks like. Some cases, about 25% of the total, that they can retain and make an award decision themselves that doesn't get passed to us at all. However, for the remaining cases, what they do is they refer that to us, and at that point is when we open the case. That's when we first receive the application and the evidence that individual has first added when they apply. At this point, we take one of our healthcare professionals, and just so everyone's aware, these are predominantly ex-NHS. They are nurses, paramedics, occupational therapists or physiotherapists. They're all registered with their own professional bodies and must have a minimum of 2 years' experience before they come to us. We then build on that professional knowledge by training them in the role that they will have to fill with us as disability assessors. And it's that impact that we're trying to find, building on their clinical knowledge. And one of those healthcare professionals with us completes an initial review of the documentation that we have. And what they're looking for in that is trying to define what is the most appropriate route for that individual to follow. If there is a start, then hopefully we can write a report there and then. And that's what we call a paper-based report. That's our aim, to try, if we can, get it through that route, because we know these are individuals and we know it's a stressful process. If we don't need to see them, then that's the route we'll follow. If there isn't sufficient evidence, we can ask for more if they've nominated or have other healthcare professionals that might be able to assist. If we still can't get that, either we don't get the evidence or we feel that it would be more appropriate for a face-to-face assessment, then we channel them to a different route. Before COVID, we used to do a mixture of either inviting people onto one of our clinics, which are located around the province, or we would go to their home and see them. And we used to go to their home on more than 50% of those cases. Since the start of the pandemic, for obvious reasons, we switched to telephone assessments. We actually switched that across in just 1 week, again, to enable the service to continue, because we're aware of how important this is and the requirement for these people to move through as quickly as possible. If we go to that assessment route, that face-to-face, so at the moment, we can do telephone assessments. We've also started to see people back in our clinics, if that's appropriate for them. Look at how we can link up through video equipment if the technology is appropriate and available to that individual. So we're constantly looking at different ways that we could conduct that assessment. The aim of that assessment is for one of our healthcare professionals to chat with the individual and really understand how their condition, and there may be multiple conditions, how their condition is impacting their daily life and their mobility. Now, during the course of that assessment, they're trying to understand impact, good days, bad days, and Laura will be able to tell you more about this later on as well. But we conclude with a report that has 12 different activities that says their functional impact, and how it plays out for them in their daily lives. That report then runs through a series of quality checks. If they're a new healthcare professional with us, then we will check 100% of their work, the senior clinician. Even if they're experienced and have passed through all of the approvals process put in place by the department, we still regularly check, randomly sample to make sure that the quality is of a high standard. That report is then submitted back to the Department for Communities. It is that report that forms part of the evidence that allows the case manager in the department to make a decision. When they're looking at those decisions, they may come back to us and ask us for some extra advice. They may challenge our reports, and on some limited cases, less than 1%, they may ask us to rework that case and do it again. But it's that report alongside all the other evidence that they then use for their process, which is the decision at the end. I'd highlight at this point the decision making sits solely with the Department for Communities and any process that follow on. So end-to-end process owned by the department, but our element in the middle, although very, very important, forms part of the evidence that allows that case manager to make a decision.
So thank you, Chair. That concludes our opening statement. I'll hand back to you for questions.
Thank you very much. We are having some difficulties picking you up on this end. I think that our broadcasting has confirmed that it's to do with your linkage on your end, unfortunately. But I think we've picked up the majority of your comments. So thank you so much for that. As I'm chairing the meeting, I'll ask a few questions first. I'll just say to the members in the room and any online, on Starley for joining us, if they could raise hands to indicate for me. I've got Andy coming in first, and then we'll see who else comes in. So just to start off with my questions, just as you spoke about there, you mentioned that there's a disability stakeholder group that you confer with. Are there any representatives from Northern Ireland on that group?
On the disability groups?
Yeah.
Question, sorry, Chair, we was a bit crackly at our end.
Yes, please. Is there anybody from Northern Ireland, or what representation from Northern Ireland is in the disability stakeholder group?
Yes, I'm going to hand over to Laura, but yes, we absolutely do have representatives from Northern Ireland.
Yes, thank you, Anthony, for handing that over. We engage with lots of different stakeholder groups in Northern Ireland. We've been engaged with Autism Northern Ireland and multiple other groups. In fact, actually, we have a really good relationships with some of the stakeholder groups in Northern Ireland, perhaps more so than within GB.
Okay, I'm just interested in that because our own Committee for Communities has a disability stakeholder group that's working on the disability strategy, and I was wondering if they were engaged, but we can check that out from our end. You've also said that the alternative methods for assessment, such as the telephone assessment, is less stressful. Have you got a report that has checked that with claimants to see that the telephone assessment is less stressful?
We don't have a report, but we do have the anecdotal evidence. Laura, again, would you pick that up?
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I think that is a really, really important point, that we're not underplaying the fact that telephone assessments are as stressful, or sometimes more stressful than having to come to an assessment centre. We've been involved in a sort of project to review this with the department, to look at people's feedback from telephone assessments. This was last year, to understand whether it was something that was working for individuals. And my understanding is that individuals applying for PIP who've gone through telephone assessments have been consulted in that process.
Okay, thank you. I've been involved with the disability sector for far too many decades, to be honest, and I'm quite astonished to hear that, because having been through some of the cases, and I myself have, as an appointee for a disabled person, have been through the process, someone may be in absolute floods of tears on the other end of the telephone assessment, but it's never recorded in the report. It just says the person could speak clearly on the phone, so I am concerned about that. Just my final sort of set of questions. As you know, the committee here received a presentation from the Northern Ireland Public Service Office, NIPSO, and overall its investigation found that the Department for Communities and Capita had failed to properly obtain and use all relevant medical information to help them assess claims for PIP. You have highlighted to us that 45% of cases where a request for further evidence has been made, you receive no response, and the remaining 55% of information takes an average of 22.5 days to be returned to us. I have a few questions just in connection with this. How often do you request further medical evidence?
Hugh, how often do we request further medical evidence?
We request further medical evidence on approximately 40% of the cases. They really are individual on why they might be. Sometimes there's a recognition of the evidence might be already available, or we go to the supporting teams. We do, and I think it's made clear in the NIPSO report that the return rate of some of that evidence has not been as strong as we would like. So we're trying to understand how we can make that smoother. And also, some of the evidence we do get back equally doesn't characterise the functional impact. It might be clinical evidence again. But I think that's an area where the report quite rightly highlights areas that we could improve on, which is what we welcome, trying to understand how we can work with external healthcare professionals to provide the right evidence that enables us potentially to do a paper-based report, or even support a face-to-face report in an appropriate manner.
Chair, if I wouldn't mind just adding something to that, if possible.
Yep.
Yeah, we're also working with the department on an initiative at the moment called Proportionate Assessment for Severe Disabilities. So medical evidence that comes to us that perhaps doesn't give us answers to all of the 12 activities, but it does indicate that someone is quite significantly functionally impacted from their condition on both components. We're able to do a paper-based report, which is a sort of overview report, to enable us to then not have to go out asking for answers to those specific questions, but enable us to write an overview for the department to say that they are significantly functionally impaired due to their condition, and sort of swiffen the process for those individuals.
Okay. Can I just ask on that, have there been any conversations between yourselves, the department and the Department of Health here? Because I hear an awful lot of concern and complaint from our, as you can imagine, pressurised Department of Health that this consistent looking for medical records in order to get PIP or any other benefits is causing significant delay and pressure within our health department. Has there been any discussion about how to maybe streamline that somewhat better?
It's absolutely critical. Oh, I'm sorry, can you hear us okay?
We're hearing you now, yes, sorry.
I'm sorry, so sorry, on the technology side on our front, the joys of the pandemic. Yeah, we clearly, the involvement of GPs and the Department for Health is absolutely critical in this area, and I do believe the department is engaged with them.
Yeah, it's a long-running point in both GB and here, actually, to say how could we have better access to medical records and actually relieve some of the pressure on some of the GPs who we know have plenty of other things to deal with as well. So we have, through the Department for Communities, said if we could have access to those records. We've also looked at access to systems, secure email systems into Northern Ireland GP surgeries, so that we can email directly, maybe with a more simpler form to fill in, so that trying to speed up that process and make it more straightforward for GPs. At the moment, if we're sending a letter, we recognise they're getting a lot of mail in. There's lots of other priorities they need to deal with. So again, how can we make it smoother? And I think actually I would welcome the support and the advice of the committee as well today on saying, is there something that they think we could do more or they could help us with to enable it to be clearer, I think, on what we're asking for and make it more straightforward for GPs and other healthcare professionals. And I think before, I'm sure Laura would want to make this point as well, it's not just GPs. There are lots of other people in the community that could provide relevant information that would help those individuals going through the process. For us to understand their daily lives, how their condition impacts their good days and their bad days, we absolutely recognise that on a one-off day in a face-to-face, many people, through quite rightly through their own pride, will put on a show of being better than they might be. And that's why we need sometimes that evidence to understand how they really are and who supports them in their lives. So that evidence could come from other areas as well. All of that is valuable to our assessors in formulating the report that they write and understanding that individual, their life, and how their condition impacts that. I don't know if Laura, whether you want to add anything to that as well.
I think you've articulated that really well, Hugh. The point is it doesn't necessarily have to come from a GP, and we would welcome discussions with trusts or support from the committee to try and help us get that useful further evidence, or even discussions with your constituents and the individuals applying for PIP about what is useful further evidence and what is not, so they're not spending their time going chasing for their GP or someone that they've seen for something that actually may not add that, or may not change from them needing to do from them doing a paper-based assessment to having a face-to-face assessment.
Okay, thank you. I do have other questions, but I don't want to hog everything today, folks, so I'll move on to Andy Allen, MLA, first. And the others on start leave, if you want to indicate, if you want to ask a question. Thank you.
Thanks, Vice Chair. Vice Chair covered a couple of points I was going to cover, so I'll try not to touch on those. Firstly, can we start off with, and thank you for your presentation, and apologies if I do cover anything you covered. I really struggled to hear your contribution. Can you advise me on average, or the definitive number of assessments each assessor has per day?
So we have targets, but we don't have anything hard and fast. So an assessment will take as long as it takes to make sure that we can do it properly. But broadly,
Really struggling to hear, Chair.
Yes, we schedule 3 appointments, a maximum of 3 appointments a day, and that's for an experienced disability assessor. We've actually reduced that amount in the last couple of months, because we found during the pandemic period, particularly when we were doing telephone assessments, there are disability assessors, when calling up an individual, it might be the only person they'd spoken to for quite a while. So the conversation was a little bit drawn out. Just simply allow that. So 3 appointments a day. However, there are a number, for legitimate reasons, that can't attend, might cancel quite late on, or simply there's a problem with the phone, can't connect. So actually, although we do 3 a day, in the round we actually expect our disability assessors to complete about 12 in a week. So taking account, some days we do 3, some days there'll be 2.
Okay, and if I caught that correctly, you said that was for your more experienced disability assessors, 3 per day, was that?
Yes, correct.
Okay, so the less experienced, how many would you be expecting for them?
When they come out of the training, we start them off on a gradual, what we call a speed to competency, which just accelerates the amount. They start off on 1 a day, but they'll equally have days where they have no reports at all, just to allow them to catch up, continue their training, speak to a coach, and then they'll come back. And we gradually, over a period of about 6 to 10 weeks, we try and build that up gradually, incrementally to 3 a day.
Okay, thanks very much. And can you, for my mind, can you talk me through a typical week for an assessor, how that is broken down by way of assessments, and then the time required to write the HCP report for the department?
Thank you. I think that's a very good question, Mr. Allen. And I have done, I've seen probably hundreds of individuals for their PIP assessment. So on a day-to-day, so they are scheduled their assessments in the morning, allowing time in between. And we just found that was how our disability assessors preferred to work their day. But obviously, if they have their own needs, then we will flex that around. And obviously take into consideration sometimes our individuals who are applying don't like a morning appointment, so we will facilitate something in the afternoon or the evening or the weekend for them. So the assessor will prepare for all their assessments in the lead-up. They will telephone at this current stage the individual, dial in any companion, facilitate any audio recording if it's requested, and then go through the assessment process with them, allowing time for a break should they need to, and gather that information from them. Once they have spoken with their 3 individuals for the day, we then encourage them to take a little break and sort of replenish, refresh themselves. Then they go back and then they start to pull that information together so they can then use the resources that we create in my team on our online learning platform, or if they want to speak to a coach and get that support that they need, and write up those reports over the afternoon period. Some people prefer to have a bigger break and then they might write them up a bit later on. And we try and encourage people to work to when they can be most productive and be able to deliver the most quality written assessments.
Okay, so the three assessments are done in the sort of morning time, and the reports written thereafter for the 3?
Yeah.
Okay, would it not be better practice to do the assessment and then the report for each thereafter, when it's fresh in the assessor's mind?
I'll just ask my colleague Hugh actually to talk. Just have looked at for the delivery of PIP assessments.
Yeah, it's absolutely something we've looked at, to do the assessment and then give time to write the report. What we concluded, though, is when you put that limitation, as in you've got another assessment at a certain time, you limit their ability of writing the report. And if they then start to rush it because they're thinking, oh, I need to finish this by the end of the hour because I've got another assessment. So we found it easier to get them into sort of assessment mode. They would do the 3, as Laura said, with a break in between, making notes as they go. They then settle themselves, and then they would move on to writing them. And then they could take as long as they want. They can speak to a coach, they can seek further advice, they can discuss it with our support lines. And they don't have that, I must finish by this time because I'm into another assessment. No. So we've been looking at it over the years, and that's how we've sort of concluded.
No, and I appreciate that, and there's a rationale to that, but I have often seen it, and it's often been argued in the public domain as to the discrepancies that appear in individual claimants' HCP reports. And could it not be argued that perhaps is where some of the discrepancies are coming from, when a HCP advisor looking at their notes and is maybe distorting one assessment with the other accidentally? We are all human beings; we're not robots. I would have concern with that process. Obviously, I'm not a subject matter expert, but I would have thought it would be much better to do the report when it's fresh in mind. In terms of that, can I ask about flexibility? So you talk a lot about not constraining or putting time restrictions on the HCP reports and the disability assessors. So 12. You like each disability assessor to complete 12 assessments per week. How flexible is that? If a disability assessor says, well, I'm only going to get 5 completed due to the complexity of each case, as quite often that is the case, and the need to write up the report, how flexible is the system?
So I'll let Hugh answer the detail. I mean, I think the simple answer is it's flexible over a short period. So of course, over any one week, it can be very flexible. But then over a more longer period, clearly, if they're struggling to make the 12, then we need to make interventions to give them extra support. So I think 12 is an average over a period, as opposed to any one particular week we're forcing anybody to make those targets. No,
I think that's correct. Yes, initially we just let that flow, but we do watch and see if a disability assessor has had multiple cancellations or multiple fail to attend, and obviously they've got a lot of extra time then, and we look at how to bring that back in. You also made a point about the complexity of the cases, and I think this is a really important point. We're also now trying to understand if we can spot the complexity early on. And so if at initial review we can see cases that we think would be more complex, and trying to then schedule those accordingly so that we don't put 3 complex cases onto a disability assessor on the same day, or with a new starter when they're only doing 1, trying to make sure that their first case isn't a really difficult case. Now, at the moment, that requires some sort of scheduling changes that we're trying to build, but we're really hopeful we'll be able to bring that in quite soon. They do have an element of flexibility. If an assessment does carry on and they've not completed, they can, contacting their team manager, delay that, so continue it running, but we do then have to tell the following appointment potentially, sorry, your disability assessor's been otherwise delayed. So that causes a cancellation, which is extremely traumatic for that individual. So we do try and avoid that, but there have been situations where it not gone into other cases as well.
No, I appreciate that.
Mr. Allen, can I just add?
Yep.
Sorry, I was just going to add that I know you touched on if they only submit perhaps 5 of the 12, that I sort of interpreted that as in they'd seen 12 people and had only submitted 5 reports. I think as health professionals, I often find that people hold on to reports because they want to really get it right for that individual, and sometimes we do coach them and support them to say, but by spending extra time on that assessment and that report, that there's other people waiting, and that every person you've seen is an individual and is waiting for their outcome. So we try and do our best through coaching, through with the team manager. We have a lot of data to see if people do hold on to their reports for too long, about how we can help them to not delay and sort of expedite this, to quote your word of the day, so that the individual isn't being delayed in getting their outcome.
No, I appreciate that, and I'm glad you bring up the point on data. Data is important. Do you have any data to break down the frequency and the number of occasions disability assessors complete 12? The breakdown of that, how many each disability assessor in terms of assessments they complete per week? Do you have any such breakdown you can provide to yourselves?
Yes, we absolutely do.
Yeah, we track all of that. So if you'd like to, we can provide that for you at a later point.
Yeah, I would very much welcome that if possible. You talked very much about training. Can you give us a flavour of the training? Because obviously training is very important in the field of disability assessor. Can you give us a flavour for the training and what that training involves when a new assessor comes into Capita's organisation?
Yeah, I think. Sorry, I think Ms. Fanny said about training. Sorry, the link is a little bit dodgy, but yeah. So when an assessor joins us, we conduct 5 weeks of training, and that period is classroom based. It's really to build on their professional knowledge, but it's to teach them how to be a disability assessor, to recognise functional impact, which is different from a diagnosis and a clinical assessment. And we are sort of clear on this, that when you come to an assessment with us, it's not clinical or medical, it's functional, trying to understand the functional impact. So we have to teach them how to do that. We also spend some time with them teaching who they're dealing with, the type of person they're dealing with, the stresses that individual is going through, and understanding what it's like for them. So we do aim to deliver an empathetic and compassionate service. And we're taking these healthcare professionals from the NHS who dedicated their entire lives to delivering a service. And they are genuinely proud that they are helping people. Now, on the occasions, I think as Anthony said, where we've got it wrong, and we recognise that there are some of those, we will sit and we will go through trying to understand, was it an individual? What did we do wrong? Was there something in the process that got that wrong? But the training is very much focused on building on their professional experience, teaching them how to be a disability assessor, making sure that they're the right person to deal with the vulnerable people that we're about to see. And then we move from that 5 weeks training into what we call a live environment. So they go out and they'll start doing assessments, but it's a supported environment. So the first couple of assessments that they do, they will have a buddy with them, which is an experienced disability assessor. They will regularly see a clinical coach. They will regularly see their team managers to see how they're developing. And every single one of their reports is checked and audited to maintain the quality. And we continue that all the way through to and through this period, they are what's called unapproved. The DFC are the only people that can actually give us final approval for that disability assessor. And they have to demonstrate clear consistency in the quality of the work. And only at that point, when the DFC agree through their own clinicians that our assessor is ready and approved to conduct assessments on their own, only at that point will we then stop doing a 100% audits on them. So it's a drawn-out period. Hopefully that answers, but if there's anything more on the sort of other side, Laura might add.
I was just going to add actually that we have a proposal with the department at the moment that we're working through with them to slightly change our approval process because we'd like to introduce observations as part of the approval process. Because I think, Mr. Allen, you mentioned about that sometimes assessors can get cases muddled, and so there's discrepancy between the report. To do is observe them doing the assessment, then writing up the report. So we really feel confident that they've got those interpersonal skills, and what they're writing on the report is a reflection of what happened during the telephony assessment.
Okay, no, thanks for that. I think you'd finished there. It's very intermittent, this stream. In terms of the approval process, you'd said that DFC you have with DSC in relation to when an assessor can conduct assessments on their own. On how many occasions has DFC not approved? Do you have data on that you can provide to yourselves as well?
We're frozen.
I'm sorry, we lost you there. Again, I apologise for the connection at our end. Would you mind repeating the question?
Yeah, no problem. What I was just asking was about the approval process in place with DFC around when an assessor can conduct assessments on their own. Do you have any data of how many occasions DFC have not provided approval?
I'm not sure we have it to hand, but it's certainly something we can provide.
It's actually a sort of ongoing process. So the current system is they have to provide an A grade quality, that there is no feedback, no amendments, no changes at all to be written. It's a bit of a consecutively. Once they do those, we submit that as evidence to the Department for Communities. Their own clinicians check those reports, and only at that stage do they then allow the approval. What we do look at is how long it takes to get to that stage, which may be what you're alluding to as well. And we could provide you with some evidence of, on average, how long it takes, how many don't ever reach that process, and they're still in probation with us. If they don't reach approval at a certain point in time, we can say, we'll probably both be joined on this, that this isn't the right role for them, and they might leave.
Okay, and in terms of the quality audit of work, I understand that recently Capita retained that function, and the department have recently taken ownership of the function for the overall quality audit assessment. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. It is.
Okay. And is there a reason for that that you understand?
It's something that we supported because it gives a degree of independence. It avoids the accusation of marking your own homework. And I think it's also part of the long-term aspiration to take more of the work in-house as well.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. And do you have reports of your findings of those quality audit assessments? Any issues or positives that they had concluded by the end of those?
Yeah. Yes, we do report on quality, and what we have is we get feedback from every single assessment that they audit, whether that's good or bad. We have monthly meetings with the health assessment advisors team to make sure that any learnings that they're picking up from their independent audit are then getting fed back into us, so we can then do quality improvement activities on the back of those.
Okay, thanks. Just one final question. Obviously, Capita have now been delivering this service for quite a number of years on behalf of the department in regard to providing the disability assessors and the HCP reports. Over that period of time, can you furnish us with all recommendations of improvements that Capita have provided to the department from your experience, how to improve the wider process?
Yeah, by all means, and I don't know if Hugh wants to add anything, but yes, we have over the years, and obviously we've been doing the Great Britain contract from 2013. We have done a number of improvements and are continuously improving and working with the department on those. Happy to provide a list or some insight into all those different initiatives we've done. I don't know if my colleague Hugh wants to add.
Yeah, we produce a continuous improvement report each quarter that goes to the department, which lists improvements that we're suggesting, some changes that they might suggest to us. Also on the back of previous independent reports, either Walter Ray report or Marie Cameron report, we speak with the department as well and say of those recommendations, how can we bring them in, how would they be implemented? So those are listed in that as well. I think we made a number of large changes over the years as we come to terms with it, and that's been an understanding of people that are applying, how we're dealing with them, speaking to stakeholder groups. The largest ones in most recently, of course, was the switch from face-to-face to telephone assessments. We've also recently brought in audio recording so that all of our assessments can now be audio recorded, which is very much something that we would encourage individuals if they felt that would support them. We recognise that some may not want to do that, but it's there as a facility that they can do. We're also looking at different ways, if we've got the right assessment route, can we help them there? Is there a better choice for them? Trying to with the department, so we constantly look at continuous improvement, but we can send you all of those if you'd like.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And just one final quick point. You mentioned the audio assessments and the provision of that. Have you any idea off the top of your head the uptake, overall uptake?
On the audio recording, it's disappointingly low at the moment. What's the actual stats?
On audio recording so far we're around 50 cases, so it's very limited, which is why I say I would take this opportunity, I suppose, to encourage it and welcome your support in that. I know it's a capability that was called for, we've implemented it, but I think maybe there's an unease or nervousness. We just need to understand how we reassure any individual that might use that capability.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Andy. I would say, I can just say, as a rural dweller in Northern Ireland, the video link that we have today is significantly better than some of the video links that we get in rural areas, so I can understand why people in Northern Ireland don't use that video function. But I'm going to move on now. Just to let the members know, I've got Anya first, then Mark Durkin, then Ciara Ferguson. So Anya Murphy, Emily, if you want to ask your questions. Thank you, Anya.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I know a lot of points have broadly been covered by the Chair and Andy there. I know from dealing with PIP and Capita's assessments over the last 3 years in my previous role as a constituency office manager, I'd say I've most likely dealt with over 500 to 600 PIP forms for constituents. I have one real issue that I'd like to highlight, and it's the generic nature of the reporting system that Capita has. One in particular, and I'd like if you could provide us with some rationale as to why it's remarked on the reports, as to why someone's appearance is always mostly included in the report. I think, if my memory serves me correctly, it comes under if the applicant is well kept or not. Now, obviously, in cases of disability or whether it's mental health, I can't understand why somebody's appearance, or as it's remarked as well kept, would matter.
I can take that one, Sophie. General appearance is a requirement under the legislation to comment on, and you're the first person I've actually heard raise that, to myself anyway, and it's certainly something that I will take away and have some discussions with the department over, because that might be something we can potentially change. With the introduction of telephone assessments as our primary way of assessing individuals, we actually don't see them, but as I say, we don't necessarily comment, or we'll just say that it's a telephone assessment. But yes, I'll absolutely take that away and discuss it with the department, and can give you some feedback once I've had those discussions.
That would be brilliant. And I suppose just on from that point, when you state that it's in legislation, could we get confirmation of that if it is mentioned in legislation? And could we get confirmation, possibly from your own point of view and any medical background that any of your team may have, as to why that is constantly, and I mean it's constantly mentioned in the reports? I could nearly rhyme off the top of my head the key adjectives that are added in. So look, that would be brilliant if you could get back to us with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. That's me, Chair. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I'll bring in Mark Dark and Emily.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to the guys there for the presentation. Kind of my son just the link hasn't been great. Dr. Mark said that here the high quality and empathetic experience. I didn't hear if it preceded that, but I do think it's say that the past.
You're.
Yeah.
All right.
Feedback in the background.
There seems to be feedback in the background, Mark. Apologies. It might actually be Capita at your end that's interfering. If there might be yes, if you mute yourself, that might help. Mark, if you want to continue on now, sorry.
Continue on or start again?
Start again. Thank you, Mark.
I was just lamenting the quality of the link, and it could be mine as well. It's Capita's, to be fair today. However, in the introductory remarks, I had heard used high quality and empathetic experience. I didn't hear what had preceded that in the sentence, but I think it is fair to say that people we hear from haven't had a high quality and empathetic experience in their dealings with Capita. That brings me to the customer satisfaction survey, where you're striking satisfaction rates of 99 or 100%, which is quite staggering. I was going to ask who the independent research company is, and while there's another piece there where you talk about complaints and you're getting fewer than 1% of assessments result in a complaint. However, what's the percentage that result in an appeal? And I think it's fair to say that if someone's appealing a decision, that they're not happy with the process that they've been brought through?
Yes, so I'll just pick up on the first point around the customer satisfaction. That is an independent company that is employed to randomly select people who've been through the assessment process at the point they finished, and they will phone them up and they'll ask them a question about whether they were satisfied, very satisfied or dissatisfied, and these are the results we're getting. And likewise with the complaints, genuinely the complaints we get for our part of the service have come down year on year. I think it's back to the point that Hugh was talking about at the beginning, which is the end-to-end process. We are really a part of it, so that's the bit that we are being measured on. If they subsequently then appeal and their decision is overturned, etc., usually when more medical evidence has come to light, then that is a level of dissatisfaction. But for the bit that we're in control of, for the majority of people, feedback and the quality is good. But as I said, and I'm sorry about the link again in my opening remarks, that's not to say that things are perfect. We make judgments all the time in what we do. Sometimes those judgments are wrong, and people have a bad experience. But for the vast majority, it is positive.
No, it's strange. I don't even think Carlsberg would get satisfaction rates like that, or complaint rates as small. I do acknowledge and welcome your apology to people who have been failed by Capita. Sorry, doesn't seem to be the hardest word.
He's not coming back.
Apologies, Mark, we seem to have lost you.
If you go to the table, they won't see you.
I think we've lost Mark, unfortunately, at this stage. He seems to have gone frozen. We'll try and bring Mark in again if we can get him unfrozen. I think it might be at his end. In that case, then, we'll move on to Ciara Ferguson. Ciara Ferguson, MLA, if you want to come in at this stage.
Yeah, thank you, Capita, for coming along this morning. I really appreciate it. I've just two questions, and I'll go with the two. I've one for Laura and just one for Hugh. Laura, obviously someone who in her previous position worked at the, I suppose, a front line and on a one-to-one basis with vulnerable individuals. I'm quite aware, obviously, there's a lot of bureaucracy that can't take place, and obviously priority must be given, as you mentioned, an empathetic, a listening ear and a person-centred approach. So I'd be quite interested in relation to what is the percentage or ratio time actually spent with an individual, listening to that individual, because obviously they know best how their life is impacted on their disability. So just maybe that ratio between the level of time spent with the individual and the level of them paperwork and administration for an assessor with the overall individual. And then secondly, Hugh, just yourself, I'm just interested, you mentioned that obviously with all cases, 25% are generally the department deals with there and then and makes a decision on, and 75% are referred to yourself. So I'd just like to kind of unpack that 75%. What is the difference? Is it because of having to follow up on more evidence, or is it because the cases are far more complex and need other expertise? So that's my two questions. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms Ferguson. I might touch on both of those actually, as Hugh might also touch on both of them. So in terms of the ratio, they tend to be about 2/3 of their time actually speaking to individuals. If you are a field disability assessor, so 2/3 of your day is assessments, and then we aim for about 1/3 of their day as in writing up and doing the administration. But that can also include speaking to your coach and gaining that level of support, as you would.
We're still here. Oh, perhaps they have gone. Looks like members that we have lost Capita, unfortunately. We'll maybe see if they try to come back in again. Oh, I think
I've been timed out, maybe.
I think.
I apologise again for the technology issues we're having. Next time we'll come in person if that's okay.
And so I was just saying that the afternoon they would then spend that writing up, and it's a bit like what you do on the wards. Like when I was on the wards, I would spend time with my individuals, with my patients, and then I would spend some time having to do the admin, which is still within the NHS. You might be able to provide, or we can take away and provide some of the specifics around the data. And then your other question.
Yeah, 25%. So I can take that. So the 25% cases that the department retain are what's called award reviews. These are people that have already gone through the PIP process once and have a time period of when it comes for renewal. When that case comes back to the department, if there have been no significant changes or the evidence supports a continuation, then the department may say, we've got enough evidence here to actually continue to make that award decision. If there's any changes, both, and maybe the conditions got worse, so we need to understand that, and potentially the benefit might increase. If there are any changes, then they send them to us to make an assessment. But if the condition is similar and the evidence is there to support that their award review was right the first time it continues, then they hold those cases. About half of all the work that we see now are award reviews that come back into us, but 25% of those the department keeps and doesn't send to us.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mark Durkin has been able to come back in now. Mark, I'll maybe bring you in to finish your questions. Mark, sorry we lost you there. If you want to finish your questions, Mark.
I'm sorry about that too. It was pretty frustrating all around. I know we've had a lot of interference this morning. What I was going to get on to now, I suppose, was we've heard from, and this has been broadcast on radio, it's not people necessarily coming privately to us as MLAs or whatever, although I think that has happened as well in certain circumstances, who work for or who have worked for Capita, who claim that they are set targets, not in terms of the number of cases or applications that they have to process, but in terms of what success or failure rate they should be hitting, or approval or refusal rate. Do you apply any sort of practice like that? I mean, do Capita set such targets, or are Capita set such targets by the department, or can you categorically deny that that's the case?
It is categorically false. It has always been false. It always will be false. It would be absolutely morally repugnant to set any sort of targets of those nature. We don't set them. We never have set them. We never will set them. Why this urban myth is perpetuated, I have no idea. We do have quality targets for our assessors, and over the period we have efficiency targets, which we like them to meet, because clearly it's important for our assessments to be completed in a timely way so that payments are not withheld, and clearly they need to meet quality targets. But we absolutely never have and never will have any sort of targets around award rates or whatever.
Okay, no, I thought it was fair to put that question out there and give you the opportunity to refute that perception, because I think it is fair enough to describe it as a perception in some quarters. In terms of, I suppose, the extension, we'll be hearing from the department after this session, but the extension of your contract here, we know the monetary value of that. Let's just say, and I was wondering, in terms of yourselves as a company, the value of that contract, or do you know how profitable is the work that you do here in Northern Ireland to you as a company? What are the margins like?
So it's broadly in line with the margins we make across other similar contracts. Work in the public sector is not high margin work. It'll push, you might just about get to double digits. But it's profitable, but not extremely profitable. But it is in line with what we make across the public sector as a whole.
Okay, and sorry, I'll just I suppose, go back before I finished to the point that it got cut off while I was making. I don't know how much of it you'd heard, but it was, I suppose, like, well, we welcome your apology. What people really need to hear are assurances, and they need to see changes. I suppose that the mistakes, and I think it says it's more than mistakes, it's been described as systemic maladministration, can be eradicated. I don't know, can you give those assurances now that you are doing everything?
So we've left out.
No, we're still here.
Sorry, Mr. Durkin. Sorry to be back. Sorry, Mr. Durkin, I lost you again then. So I'll repeat again the apology. Genuinely, if we make mistakes and it has some serious consequences, then that is tragic. And yeah, I can't apologise enough, to be honest. We do learn from our mistakes. There's been some high-profile cases in Great Britain that have been in the news in the last few days. We've made some fundamental changes to our processes as a result of that. And that, I said in my rather truncated opening statement, we are committed to continuous improvement across a whole range of areas. We genuinely do try and put people at the heart of what we do. Unfortunately, we do have to make judgments as well, and sometimes those judgments don't go to plan. But that doesn't mean we're not committed to continually improving things and putting people right at the heart of everything that we're doing. So I'm more than happy to give those assurances, and I'd be delighted, Mr. Durkin, if you'd come and visit us and we can talk to you in more detail about what we're doing.
Okay, I might take you up on that, but thank you.
Thank you, Mark. And thank you to Capita. Just before we finish off, I have a couple of questions, just for clarification from my own point of view. So I just want to tease out with you. So if a person has scored 0 in their assessment and there's a mandatory reconsideration, and the outcome of that mandatory reconsideration, there is an award of PIP, which may be, you know, the normal PIP rate or a higher level of PIP. Is there a review internally to find out why there has been such a difference between the initial assessment and the outcome of the mandatory reconsideration?
Yes, well, I haven't asked Laura to answer that one because it's a slightly technical one.
Yes, thank you, Anthony. I actually think that might be a question for the department in your session. So we would welcome feedback after there has been a mandatory reconsideration so we could learn. But because the mandatory reconsideration process is managed by the department, we don't get that level of feedback. Often we'll see it when they perhaps come to reapply or be reassessed. We do get, so if there's been new further evidence that's come into and the case manager needs advice on that, or we've done rework on the assessment at the case manager's request, we get insight into that, but not always at the mandatory reconsideration stage. So if you are putting that question to the department this afternoon, then we would obviously support further insight on that.
Thank you very much. Look, that's astonishing, but no, we certainly will be asking that. The other thing, just for the record, who writes the questions for the assessment?
So I can take that one as well. So there are no set questions for the assessment. We call it a semi-structured interview. There is guidance, so we have to follow the PIP. And we would also help particularly our new assessors by guiding them as to which areas they need to explore. So, for example, asking them about how their condition was diagnosed, what symptoms they have. But the way in which they do that, we encourage them and implore them to use their skills as a HP to engage and respond to the individual. Someone with, for example, paranoid schizophrenia, you wouldn't want to then be asking them particularly about how they manage to walk or anything around their physical health necessarily. So we'd maybe tailor the questions to the way in which they could respond to or understand, for example.
Okay, thank you. As we know, it is the personal independence payment, and I've been a disability advocate for years. I've always found it quite astonishing that people who we're encouraging to be the best and achieve as much as they can do to access this benefit have to prove how much they cannot do. and it often leaves those people, and if we're talking about a person-centred approach, it leaves those people very deflated afterwards. And I appreciate that your staff, I'm very thankful actually that your staff do get support afterwards. Quite often we as MLAs are faced with people who are devastated after they've been through their assessment, because it's bringing back just how limiting disability can be and how much they're not the normal, which is very unfortunate what we're trying to do. Is there anything that you could suggest or you would recommend going forward, how we can make this more about the independence of a person rather than spelling out how not independent they are?
I'll take that one. It is very tricky, and I've done assessments where people have said, I can do this, I can go out, and you're thinking to yourself, oh, really? And it is the job of the health professional to be able to tease that out. We've touched on if you want to bring a companion with you who can sort of help explain that as well, if the individual perhaps has communication difficulties or lacks insight, for example. But I think it's just about being open and honest. And, the reason why we have health professionals doing this is because they can be empathetic. It's like speaking to your GP. It's like if you were going to the NHS, we want them to be able to be open and honest with us and feel that we can offer them that protected space to do so. I appreciate it is talking a lot about what they can't do. And that can be really distressing for individuals. I've had friends that have gone through the process and afterwards reflected about how hard it was for them. But we try and do our best to get that through to them, that we are listening, we're empathetic, and that this is the process, unfortunately. I don't know if anyone else has anything they want to add on that point.
I think it's the support that someone can provide for that individual going through that's really valuable. I would also welcome, and we continue to engage with stakeholder groups and yourselves, advice on how we can make it less stressful. I think some of that might be we're looking recently at our letters that we send out. Is the letter too formal? Is that providing an element of stress? How do we reduce that? How do we make the whole process? The reasons why we have to do it is separate from this debate, but if we have to do a face-to-face assessment, how can we de-stress that the individual? So we welcome any comments or advice, and as Anthony said, we welcome meeting you, any of you, outside of this environment as well, to come and see us, and I think you would have some valuable information as well that might be able to help us with that.
Yeah, I have been a carer in the past. Just so we're very clear and it's on the record, if someone presents then for assessment who may have a mental health issue or learning disability, or it could be just a very nervous person who finds it very difficult to speak either on the phone or in person, the carer can then step in and speak on behalf of that person as part of the assessment.
Yes, as long as they, we always encourage the carer or the companion to be part of the assessment, but we equally try to be person-centred. We've all come from the NHS, after all, a lot of us have, where it's a culture where you treat the individual, so your patient, the individual, as a person. So that's why a lot of the time we will direct questions to that individual, because we don't want to ignore them. There's nothing worse than someone, perhaps being pushed along in a wheelchair, and you speaking to the person that's pushing them. No, that person is an individual, so that's why we direct our questions to them. They will recognise if they are struggling and they need some support, and we always train our disability assessors to encourage the companion to be as involved, but essentially it is down to the individual being assessed, because we sort of look for their guidance. If they're happy for the companion to get involved and support, then absolutely.
Okay, I just would say that I'd asked about learning disability and people with mental health issues, because as a carer who looked after someone with severe learning disabilities, when they turned around and looked at my face because they didn't understand the question that was being asked, it would have been very helpful to be very clear to the assessor that carers can speak on behalf of their loved one, especially if they're an appointee for them. Just final question. Would it be possible for us to see the detail of your efficiency and quality targets for staff? Because it would be quite useful to see that, to see how that how that's worked through, that process is designed, and what that is.
I'm so sorry, you froze again there, so we missed the question. Would
Sorry,
you mind
I
repeating it?
was just asking, would it be possible for you to share with us the detail of your efficiency and quality targets for staff? Because that would be quite useful for us to see that.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Thank you very much. My final one for you is, I know that you have said a lot of your assessors, well, all of your assessors, I think, are all medical professionals. Is there a percentage of those assessors who have disabilities themselves or who are actual carers? Do you know that information?
Who are carers or
people
disabled?
themselves with
Do we get that?
Don't have it to hand.
No, we do have that information, yes. I don't have that to hand, but we can send it on to you.
Thank you very much. I think our section 75 breakdown of who people are helps us to know if there are people who are assessors who are have disabilities themselves are involved. But I know that has been a long set. Oh, sorry, Andy. Just
yeah, sure. Apologies, I didn't nip out there just quickly. If I could just come back with one quick question. See, in the graph you provided is in relation to the number of assessments closed and the complaints received. I think roughly a quick calculation, probably about 30 complaints on average across that duration of that period. Is there any themes to those complaints or not?
Yeah, there are. So it's usually linked to assessments. Sometimes we have them around the Disability Assessor, and we spot those. So if we start to see complaints about one individual, then what we'll do is we'll put somewhere, a senior clinician will attend one of those assessments to identify it, and then we can pull them out and we can retrain them. If it persists, or obviously if it's more serious, then we can remove them from the role because we do want them to as I said, provide the empathetic service. If they're not doing that and we can spot it, then if we can't retrain it, then we will remove someone.
Yeah, and see, in terms of those complaints, were all of those complaints on that graph upheld or not? I don't see the detail there.
No, we can send you a breakdown because we have a level 1, which is an initial complaint that we'll deal with. If they're not happy, there's then a level 2, which we will then, with a senior complaints handler, we'll have a look at it. They then also have the ability to go to the department if they're not happy with ours, and they can take it further again after that. So we've got a complete breakdown of those, which I'm happy to send you.
Yeah, and just to pick up on Mark Durkin's point in terms of the feedback we get on the ground as MLAs, I quite often feel that constituents, having gone through a traumatic process, don't often complain. So, what steps have Capita taken to ensure where people have been dissatisfied with the process, that they are aware of the complaints process, and importantly are supported to lodge a complaint so Capita can better understand where there are shortcomings?
Yeah, that's a question I'm going to ask you to pick up, but yes, it's a very good point.
So on the satisfaction survey, we can't identify individuals on that because it's an anonymous survey. So we do see the comments that they make, but we can't identify those back because it's through a third party. We do, on all of our paperwork and on our websites, put clearly how you can complain, the methods, the routes that you could take. All of our phone numbers, obviously if you phone any of them, then we can route you through, or email, and we have specific emails as well on all of our paperwork that they can do. Likewise, if they speak to the DFC, they will direct them into us. So I think it is a valuable point. I think if people are worried that their complaint won't be heard or we won't handle it, then I think it's something we should pick up and try and make sure that we are making it clear that it's an independent body it's within Capita, but there's a process that ultimately it can escalate to an independent body as well, so their complaints will be heard. I see those personally come to me every month. I see the breakdown of the satisfaction survey, what the dissatisfied comments are. I also see the breakdown of the complaints. I see where they are, who they're with, and I see the follow-ups on those. So we have all that, but as you said, if you think there are individuals out there that feel they can't complain, then I think that's something we need to address.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And in terms of that, is there a theme to the resolution that's achieved in terms of the complaints? Is it a compensatory payment to the person who's complained to compensate them for the impact and the anguish that's been caused in that regard?
It depends on the level. So we'll speak with the individual to understand how they've been impacted. If we uphold the complaints, then again we will try and resolve that in a number of methods that are open to us. But it will be individual, so we don't have a sort of set. If your claim is upheld to this is how we proceed. We try and do them individually. Our claimant handling team will look at that case, try and understand it, and speak very much with the individual to understand the impact that they felt on their journey. And but again, and I think I'll just take this opportunity, and not just on behalf of Capita, but on behalf of myself as well, to apologise to all of those individuals. So we try, and all of my staff are trying so hard to do the right thing. It doesn't always go right, but we do absolutely want to recognise if it hasn't gone right. Firstly, we'd apologise, but how do we improve? How do we try and stop it happening again? So I say on a personal level, I want to just add to Anthony's points about apologising as well.
No, I appreciate that. Thanks very much. I'll leave it there, Vice Chair.
Thank you very much, Andy. Thank you very much, Anthony, Hugh and Laura. That has been a long session with ourselves. We thank you very much for the offer for us to come and visit. We may take you up on that, although it would be more local than it would be where you're at the moment. But we've asked a number of questions. What we can do is maybe forward those questions to you just so that we can get reply on those.
Yeah.
But for now, thank you very much for your time today. I think the committee has found that quite useful. You answered quite a lot of questions for us. I have a lot of notes here, but I'm sure we will be speaking to you again in the future. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to talk to you.
Thank you. Members, before we move on to agenda item 7, where we'll be bringing in the department to discuss the Capita contract, could I ask that we go for a short break? I'm going to close off the meeting until 11:20. I think would be time enough. Yeah, thank you. And we're back in a public meeting now. Members, we go to agenda item 8, which is the departmental briefing on the renewal of the contract for PIP assessment. Members, previous departmental replies in this issue start at page 24 of your pack. I'd like to welcome, and we have them online, Linda Williams and Mickey Kelly. Thank you so much for coming along today. Mickey, I believe that you're going to give us the briefing.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and I'm just going to start off. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. Thank you. I'm going to start off, and then Linda's going to take over at a point in the briefing. So just first of all, thank you, Chair, and members, for the opportunity to come along this morning and speak to you about personal independence payment, or PIP. Just explain very briefly my role. I'm the director in the department with responsibility for the day-to-day operational delivery of pensions, disability benefits, benefit security and debt recovery, and PIP is within that remit. At the outset, I just want to say I do understand and appreciate the importance of this issue to the committee, exemplified by our attendance here today. And as officials, I just want to assure you and the Chair and the members that we want and are fully committed to delivering the service in an empathetic and compassionate manner, where people are treated with dignity and respect. I think in administering PIP, we are dealing with some of the most vulnerable people in our community who are coping and managing with a lot in their lives. And we, really, in this process, we shouldn't be adding any further stress to that situation. And that certainly has been my guiding principle, and one that we empower among the staff as well. And it's one the Minister has reinforced as well to us. I think when cases go wrong, we apologise where appropriate, if necessary. And also, one case going wrong in my mind is one too many, because behind every statistic there's a person and an individual behind that, and I think that's very important to put on the record. You'll have received the briefing, and I wanted to draw out some key points from that regarding some of the benefit outcomes, just some of the challengings, and to touch on the Ombudsman's own initial investigation report. Just for some quick background, PIP was introduced in 2016 to replace DLA for working age people who are between 16 and state pension age. The entitlement criteria is set down in legislation and looks at a person's ability to carry out a series of everyday activities or what help or assistance they need or require. It's not about the medical condition per se, but it's an assessment of the impact of that condition. It's intended to help people with the extra costs that disabled people may face, And you can work, for example, you can work and receive PIP. So therefore it's an in-work benefit, and also it's not taxable and it's not means tested. In terms of scale of our operation here, the briefing note sort of indicates that in the last 12 months, the PIP Centre has processed over 28,000 new claims, just over 17,000 reviews, nearly 9,000 reconsiderations, and handled around 250,000 phone calls. I just think it's appropriate maybe at this opportunity to acknowledge and thank the staff and the management team in the centre for all their hard work, commitment and dedication in delivering this important service to some of the most vulnerable people in our society. The staff have really stepped up during the pandemic as well to ensure key benefits continue to be delivered in quite challenging and difficult circumstances. So I just want to say that. In terms of outcomes, you'll have noted from the briefing that at the moment, just over 156,000 people receive the benefit, and there's 8 different rates. And when you look at the breakdown of the rates, the highest rate payable is £152 per week, and nearly 39% of people are receiving the highest rate under PIP. This compares with about 16% in DLA, and also when you look across at the rest of Great Britain, about 33% are receiving the highest rates of the benefit, and in Northern Ireland we're 39%. And in terms of mental health, the main figures show as well that for mental health, 42% of all the claims that we have, or all the people who are receiving, are categorised as psychiatric disorder. And of those, quite over 60% of those people are getting the highest rate of the daily living aspect of PIP. And why is that high rate payable? It's probably due in many ways to the nature of what DLA was. In DLA, the person who received the highest rate had to have what was known as night needs. That means they needed help during the night with their disability and coping and managing with their disability. Some people would have been reluctant to maybe disclose that or reticent about filling it in. Under PIP, you receive the highest rate if you need significant help during the day. Just looking at success rates, and I think the briefing notes that it talks about as well, the management information that we publish would show that about 64% of people who actually go through the application process and the assessment process are awarded PIP. That's about 16% higher than Great Britain. And there's very good and well documented reasons for why there's also been higher incidence of uptake of DLA and now PIP in Northern Ireland. In terms of the awards duration, most 80% of our awards are for over 5 years. We don't want people having to go through unnecessary reviews, and that's an indicator that most of the awards are for over 5 years. I think it's also in terms of expenditure. I just wanted to share some information as well. The Northern Ireland Audit Office, in their report earlier this year, just reported that the total in PIP, prior to the introduction of PIP in 2015, total DLA expenditure was just over £1 billion. This year, for the financial year just finished, the total expenditure for PIP and the DLA caseload combined was £1.3 billion. And with PIP accounting for close to £1 billion of that, £917 million. And there was an Office of Budget Responsibility report which the NIO have also referenced in the report, which indicates that PIP has increased disability spending by 15 to 20% if compared to DLA, and also noted as well that PIP was no longer expected to generate the financial savings in Great Britain that were once expected when the initiative was announced back in 2010. The briefing also notes a list of the improvements, quite a comprehensive list of improvements. And I just thought I'd just pick a couple of these out rather than go through them all. And in terms of what I consider to be significant, some of the most significant changes were claimants with progressive conditions, for example, like Parkinson's or motor neurons disease, who were receiving the maximum rate had their awards changed to 10 years with a light touch review. Claimants over the state pension age also had their awards changed to an ongoing period with 10-year reviews. Again, importantly, back to the point that I was making earlier about 80% having more than 5 years reviews, both changes were again designed to prevent unnecessary reviews and ensuring people didn't have to go through the assessment process. There's also been a lot of work over the intervening years since PIP was introduced in streamlining the forms. For example, the award review form and people reporting changes was reduced down from 48 pages to 16. And more recently, in February of this year, the PIP form was revised as well to encourage people to provide more evidence and different evidence at different parts of the process. I think one of the most significant changes which has happened since Minister came back to office in January 20, and which is a step in the way towards the in-housing that the Minister has indicated, is case managers determining award reviews without an assessment if the evidence allows them to actually maintain or increase the award. If they feel they don't have sufficient evidence, they will then send the case to Capita for an assessment. But part of that process as well also involves us talking to our clinicians in-house in the department. So if the case manager needs any advice on the case about what is or any difficulties interpreting evidence, they will speak to the clinicians who will help them in that process. The ombuds, we're not complacent about improvements, and I think the department is on a continuous improvement journey. We have responded positively previously to the independent reviews of Walter Radar and Marie Kavanagh. We also looked at the recommendations and how they impact for us here in terms of the 2 independent reviews that took place in Great Britain, and also the learning from the DWP Select Committee review, which looked at PIP and Employment Support Allowance. So we very much as a department do welcome scrutiny. I think we're a learning organisation and we're all about learning. And the Ombudsman's own initiative report is another opportunity for that learning. The report, which focused specifically on examining the availability and application of further evidence, is a detailed report with 33 recommendations, many with multiple parts. And we're working through that at the moment through the detail of those recommendations. And we will deliver an action plan to the Ombudsman's Office. The Department will deliver an action plan to the Ombudsman's Office by the end of the calendar year. In the intervening period, as we progress that, we've been in discussions with the Ombudsman's Office and her team as we work through those recommendations. So it's been a collaborative approach, and we will continue that. One of the issues that I wanted to touch on was the appeals overturn rate. And I just thought it might be helpful to put some context on the appeals overturn rate. The Audit Office noted in their report about 11% of PIP decisions are actually appealed, and that's broadly comparable with DLA. And I think if you look at the figures for the sort of 5 years preceding, well, PIP was introduced in 2016. If you look at the figures in the preceding 5 years, from 2011 to 2016, and then from 2016 to 21, the appeal receipts are broadly the same in terms of the number of appeals received. Now, there may have been an impact of the pandemic in the more recent figures, but also I think in terms of PIP, we also had 128 cases reassessed during that period, which would give rise to a significant number of appeals. The overturn rate for DLA was also, quite high, in around the mid 50%, if you know what I mean. And you do tend to find that, I think, in my experience, where there's an assessment of evidence and judgment involved in all these benefits, be it PIP, Employment Support Allowance, the work capability assessment will form part of the universal credit. It tends to be high. Now, that's not an excuse to say that's acceptable or in any way things, but it's important to note that PIP doesn't stand out on its own in some of these benefits. The Audit Office also noted that feedback, and I think feedback is from appeal decisions, and how we learn from appeal decisions and appeal outcomes is absolutely fundamental and important as we move forward. The Audit Office noted that the feedback was in 3 strands: the President's annual report, a summary sheet from the Appeal Service which showed which of the 12 activities have been changed and where the points were amended. But the Audit Office also noted that there was no rationale in terms of why those particular points or descriptors were changed. And we also have a presenting officer from the department who will attend appeals. And all the presenting officers who attend appeals will complete a template on their feedback from the appeal hearing. It's important to note as well, but they're not actually present, and rightly so, when the panel is deliberating and weighting the evidence that they've heard in front of them. But we do complete a template, and we look at the learning from that to ensure that we have it. So we try to use all these feedback loops in general to determine what lessons can be learned. And we work with our case managers, our internal clinicians, and also with Capita to discuss these matters through the various quality fora. I touched on the overturn rate and the reasons why, and the President's report was also mentioned in the Audit Office report as one of the indicators of the information that we do. And that report, the most recently published one, indicated that about just 96% of decisions were correctly made, or made correctly when the decision was made. And the tribunal changed the outcome because of new evidence being made available that was not before the case manager, or the tribunal took a different view of evidence available with neither conclusion being unreasonable. Which takes us back again to the evidence issue and the Ombudsman's report. And the Minister has said in the House in response to matters in relation to this that we, and I think our words were, we need to front load the evidence. And that's what we're examining as part of this ongoing process and improvement journey. There are challenges with that in terms of how we work through engagement with the Department of Health, the other organisations that can provide evidence. And there's work going on as part of the response to the previous reviews to look at a short summary report which would go to GPs rather than the standard one which would allow them to complete the information quickly and also make it relevant to the PIP assessment. So, and members will also be aware of the recent consultation of the Health and Disability Green Paper in the Department of Work and Pensions issued, which was also issued here. And there's a particular chapter as well devoted in that consultation paper to rethinking assessments to improve outcomes, with a number of consultation questions around evidence gathering. So I think there's quite a number of challenges ahead as we work through the evidence gathering challenge and the Ombudsman's recommendations, and in taking forward and making improvements to the PIP service for people. So I hope that was helpful, just members, in setting some information in terms of PIP, its delivery, and how we've been implementing here since 2016 and the outcomes for people here. So I want to hand over now to my colleague Linda Williams, who's going to talk about the contract.
Thank you. Chair, can you hear me? And members, can you hear me?
I can indeed. Thank you, Linda.
Good morning. Chair, can you hear me? Can I just check that you can hear me?
I can hear you clearly, Linda. Can you hear me? No. Not
Chair, sorry, can I just check that you can hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
Yes. Okay, sorry, good morning, members. I suppose my name is Linda Williams. I'm the Director for Commercial and Governance Services within the department. And I have responsibility for a number of the department's largest contracts, including the Capita contract, which we are, and I'm hoping to give you an update on some, and then we'll be in the next few minutes. I suppose before I start to talk about an overview of the department's contract management arrangements of the PIP programme, I think it's really important to set out the Minister's position, particularly in relation to the management of this contract and her views on the way forward. Members, you'll be aware that our Minister has made it very clear publicly that her policy intent is to wants to deliver all health assessment services in-house for her department. However, she also recognises that it will take time to do so, and to do this and to safeguard the payments of PIP benefits and all of our benefits which require a health assessment. She has extended the existing contracts for 2 years from August 2021 to July 2023, and to this end she's also signed a future outsourced single provider contract from 2023 going forward. I think in terms of just setting out the context around this contract, the PIP assessment contract is one of the largest contracts that the department, in the Department for Communities. The value of this contract is about 140 million, and that's from 2016 to 2023. The people that are being assessed, and I think Mickey alluded to it earlier today, as did Capita, is assessing some of the most vulnerable people in our society. And the aim of the department is to manage, and the management of this contract is to ensure that an empathetic, people-centred, high-quality service is delivered and provides real value for those people that have to undertake the assessments, and indeed the public purse. My team in the department, we manage a number of provider contractors and assessments, Capita being one of those. And it's not just the PIP assessment, we also have a health assessment service for the medical support services, for our employment support allowance, and also our universal credit benefits. The focus, I suppose, in my presentation is to give you an oversight today of the contract management arrangements around that. To do this, I will be focusing on a number of areas. Our contract service levels that we have, our quality assurance framework around that, how we manage complaints, and indeed how we review satisfaction levels. The contract itself has been running since November 2012, and due to delays of welfare reform in Northern Ireland and the legislation here, it didn't come on board until June 2016. And the contract of this current contract will expire in July 2023. There are currently 139 disability assessors employed by Capita who deliver PIP assessments on behalf of the department. And all of our assessors, as you've heard previously, are registered healthcare professionals, and that is either doctors, nurses, physiotherapists, paramedics, or occupational therapists, etc. And since the beginning of the contract, just to put in context, we have assessed about 260,000 applicants and have completed assessments under the PIP and other health assessment benefits. The department has a very robust contract management practice in place that has oversight over the PIP contract, and to monitor the quality and the effectiveness of the Capita service delivery. There is a range of service levels that we have in place that Capita are held to account on. This is to ensure that a quality assessment is delivered within an acceptable timeframe, and this is central and paramount to the delivery of the service of this programme. The service level measures a sample of the quality assessment reports and for the end-to-end time it takes to deliver an assessment, and it produces a report of people's level of satisfaction and indeed their complaints response times. There's 28 service levels 28 service levels that we review on the contract, and 13 of those carry financial penalties should Capita not achieve those particular levels. The two key service levels which are consistently, I suppose, challenging are those around completing the quality assessments within the 3% of the reports, which are deemed unacceptable, or to the end-to-end service to ensure that the service is completed within an average of 35 working days for the claimants. Service credits or fines are levied when Capita fail to deliver against service credits targets, and as such as things as our quality and our clearance times. And to date in this contract, there has been just over 2.6 million, or just under 2.6 million of service levied fines have been put in place. Two of those, when they've been focused around two of those service areas, 97% of those fines are really in relation to quality standard SC1, which is around the quality levels and making sure those are at an acceptable level from the department's point of view. And the second one is just about the average time it takes to complete those assessments. These fines have mostly occurred, to be honest with you, in the first 3 years of the contract. We have seen much less levels of non-compliance of those service levels in the last number of years. In terms of the PIP contract management, we have a number of internal governance boards that actually oversee, which are related to in the brief, and some details provided in the brief around our governance framework and the overall management and our oversight of this, what we consider one of our most important programmes. These three boards have responsibility for overseeing the PIP contract, and these are with departmental officials with Capita and the staff to monitor its delivery. So we have the Performance Management Review Board, and it's held monthly, and it monitors the ongoing performance of Capita on behalf of the department. So it looks at things at complaints, it looks at our service levels, it looks at our satisfaction rates, it looks at issues that are cropping up in our health assessments or independent audit assessments. Secondly, then there is an Executive Management Board which is held on a quarterly basis, and myself as chair of that review performance over the last 3 months, and we look ahead on the contract in terms of any issues and challenges that are arising in the contract, and we deal with those with Capita directly at those meetings. And lastly, there's an annual review board, and that's held by a deputy secretary level within our department, and it looks at the previous year and also the preceding year and the year ahead in terms of any potential changes that might be arising for the common year, and obviously the overall relationship state between department and obviously with Capita in terms of making sure that is of a fit for state nature as we go forward. We have a number of other forums. We have an internal directors forum that sees very, very close working relationships between our finance, our governance, our operational, our healthcare professionals, etc. at director level, and all of our benefits across the piece. And we also have things like our innovation management board, actually, which looks after all of our substantial spends within the department to ensure that they're being spent in the right way and in the right manner. And those are done obviously via prints to management arrangements. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the PIP quality assurance framework. Quality is at the centre of all that we do in managing this contract, and ensuring the delivery of a high quality service is a priority for the PIP contract management team. To ensure this, we have a number of systems, structures and processes in place that are designed to deliver that quality outcome. The department has a health advisory team, a clinical team who are a specialist team who have grown significantly over the last year. We started off with 3 clinicians in 2019, and that has grown this year, and we'll see this team grown to just over 14 specialists, and they will provide clinical assurance and also clinical expertise. As well as you've heard previously from Capita, growing that independence view from the department. The team will provide quality assurance of the assessment reports that are produced by Capita. They will also complete a monthly clinical assessment of the assessment audits. And at present, just to let you know, members, that we would assess about 120 clinical audits across the piece, and we see that growing substantially in the beginning of the new year. We also approve Capita's Disability Assessors on certain criteria, such as their training, their exams, and their audit grades. And Capita are also required to provide assurances that the relevant registers for their staff have been checked for the healthcare professionals, evidence that the disability assessors have completed the required training by the dates that they need to do, and it also include confirmation on whether they've passed their training. And you've heard a little bit earlier about the 5 assessments and the assessment process to ensure that they are fit for purpose before they actually are put on to assess a particular customer or person that's undertaking an assessment. We also observe assessments delivered by Capita, and our health advisory team began observations with PIP in January 2020 when we transitioned on to listening into telephone assessments, obviously during the pandemic. And these were just increased substantially, obviously, during the pandemic months. And we also provide feedback to Capita on the training and the continuous improvements that they are putting in place surrounding their training. Perhaps one of the most considerable improvements that I want to talk a little bit about is around the department has made a decision to in-house independent PIP audits cases from the 1st of August 2021. Having previously these been delivered by Capita, in 2020, as part of the department's own independent review of SIB, it was proposed that we would bring in-house auditing and that oversight in-house into the department. The department itself agreed this in November 2020, and I'm happy to say that this has now been live since August 2021, and it is progressing very, very well. Very, very positive feedback to date. Following the in-housing of this independent audit, and by the new year, we have just recently increased our team, as I say, up to 14, and we will see a further 8 or 9 new healthcare professionals come on board. Those have been interviewed in September, and they will join our team. The first one starting on the 8th of November, and we will be gradually building those up within the coming months. But those increase in staff will see our audit rising to levels of what we would call a statistically valid sample of around 450 audits per month. And that will see an increase of almost 500% on audits that we're currently doing. Of course, as a department, we do not just obviously ensure that our health assessment team are focused on the quality of our assessments reports. We also work very closely with the likes of Mickey's team and indeed our other colleagues or directors responsible for our benefits to ensure that their case managers are trained and identified to ensure assessment reports that might need amending. For example, the PIP capital managers or PIP case managers, are trained to identify assessment reports that do not contain everything necessary to them to make a fair and correct decision on that claim. They will conduct a review to ensure the report is fair, it's impartial, it's legible, and it's concise. And they will also ask the departmental's quality manager to refer the case back to Capita should a rework be required or if it's necessary. And as Mickey has alluded to already, the number of reworks is roughly about 2,099 out of a circa 260,000 cases or assessments since 2016. In terms of complaints of the people claiming PIP, despite this focus on quality assurance, we try to get things right, ensure we get things right first time for people, but appreciate that this is not always possible and it doesn't always happen. If it doesn't happen, there is a robust complaints procedure in place through Capita, and they may touch on this, they've obviously touched a little bit on that through their own presentation. The department, we can also make complaints, or people can also make complaints obviously directly to the department. The department can receive complaints about the PIP process directly from the person claiming, or receive complaints after they've been through Capita's first stage 1 complaints process. Responding to complaints is an integral part of our quality management of the department, and investigating into a complaint may entail requesting input from Capita to that complaint, talking to the Disability Assessor who carried out the assessment, being interviewed by their line manager with a review of the capital case by our governance team, a review of the complainant's case by a department's quality assurance manager, and it also may entail seeking advice from our clinician team, our Department of Health advisory team, if they require further clarification and further clinical advice in any aspect of that at the assessment report. Just to put in context, members, this year to date, the department has received 202 complaints around the PIP process. In terms of people satisfaction, the contract also regularly reviews, and you heard previously from Capita some information around that process. And that process is to gain an insight into the views of the quality of the capital assessment service. An independent people's person satisfaction survey was introduced in May 2017 and is currently carried out by Wine and Dillon to gauge the levels of satisfaction being claiming from the claiming PIP with the process, including aspects and everything from the overall experience of their assessment, the manner of the assessor, the correspondence received from the assessor, and indeed the form and the type of assessment that they've undertaken, for example, telephony versus face-to-face. From May 2017 to August 2021, there was 6,325 surveys undertaken, with an average satisfaction rate of about 98.7%, and an overall service provided by Capita. Capita has consistently surpassed their monthly contractual targets of 90% satisfaction rates since May 2017. Survey results also include negative feedback, and any trends are identified and picked up and discussed, as I said, at the monthly performance management boards between ourselves and Capita, and we try and address any issues that we can at those meetings. As a final part of my presentation, I would now like to discuss the rationale, obviously, around the extension of the contract, because I think that was something that members have asked to get an update on in your letter, indeed in July and also in September. Upon Minister Harvey's appointment in January 2020, she requested that officials begin to explore the reversal of social security service privatisation and the in-housing of the service. Officials began exploring these steps and the need for in-housing the service. However, reversing the privatisation of the health assessment service in its entirety is a complex and a very timely process. On the 19th of March 2020, and due to exceptional circumstances in responding to the COVID-19 pandemic, and to ensure the safeguarding of the existing service from August 2021, Minister approved the Department to join the DWP procurement for short-term contracts. These procurements were subsequently cancelled because of HM Treasuries did not have the capacity to consider the business case, and DWP did not have the capacity to facilitate the procurements, as many of their staff had to be deployed to frontline services in order to assist in their response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And the potential bidders also advised that that they could not stand up bid teams during this time. As a result, the Department considered contingency options for the delivery of the PIP assessment service and the work capability assessment services from August 2021. We considered three options, members, at that time. One was to in-house the service, and officials identified that due to the timescales involved, it would not be possible to in-house the service by August 2023, and we wouldn't be able to do that at the earliest. There was a direct award contract to other external suppliers, and after consideration of legal advice, it was determined that this was not feasible to consider any other external suppliers without a procurement. And thirdly, we looked at extensions to the existing contracts, and legal opinion was sought which advised that there was a respectable case to extend existing contracts for up to 24 months. In GB in the mainland, DWP have also extended their similar contracts for the similar period of 24 months. In light of this, and after consideration of all the other remaining options, an extension of the current contracts with improvements by 24 months from the 1st of August 2021 to the 31st of July 2023 offers the best means of safeguarding provision of health assessment services in the current climate. The Minister approved this subject to a number of conditions. She asked that these included the development of a business case to appraise options for future delivery of health assessments from August 2023 to include in-housing, and an evaluation of the external provider's performance to identify potential enhancements to the service. Through this process, while the contracts were being extended for the further 2 years, the Department is working closely with Capita to implement a number of improvements to the service during this extension period. Improvements being considered at the moment are maximising the number of paper-based reviews conducted by Capita in line, for example, with the Green Paper. We want to ensure that those who do not need to undertake an assessment, where there's enough evidence to make a decision, do not have to. And also in line with the proposals under the Green Paper recommendations, we want to provide a greater choice of assessment type, So in addition to the telephone reviews, we ought to offer, for example, video assessments, which are currently, we're looking at proof of concept evaluations at the moment, but also looking at face-to-face, obviously, and a number of other avenues. There is improvements from about 45 recommendations from our own independent SIB post-project evaluations of both our contracts over the last 10 years. The Northern End Audit Report, the Marie Kavanagh Second Independent Review, and indeed the Equality and NIPSO Review, which has been referred to earlier by Mickey. These included things such as improvements in the introduction of information management systems in the future, improvements in the communication of how we deal with people and engage with people that are trying to make claims, better forecasting our future volumes in terms of managing the contract, and also recruitment and retention of disability assessors, which is a challenge. Changes were also being considered around the timing of our surveys, so not having the surveys immediately before award of credit. That was one of our own independent recommendations, and we're looking, obviously, contrary to what DWP are going to do in the new contract, we are looking to do assessments indeed immediately following Capita's element of the service, and also actually post-award. We're looking to do 50% split between both of those timings. We're also looking at special rules for terminal illness. This process, which fast-tracks claims, benefits for claims for those with terminal illness within 6 months, will move to terminal definitions to 12 months, and obviously we're waiting in legislation around that. We're also looking at a voice of the claimants forum, which is that where people that are trying to make claims under PIP will be able to discuss directly with the likes of PIP case managers and Capita assessors their experiences and their thoughts about the PIP assessment process, which will provide an opportunity to identify areas of good practice as well as areas for development or enhancement of the service that we offer. As mentioned previously regarding the quality assurance, the in-housing of our independent audit began on the 1st of August, and we are ramping up volumes of the cases, and this is going to be conducted on a monthly basis, and we should be able to look at 450 cases per month coming from the new year as we move forward. In terms of the future delivery of the service, I'll now discuss the direction of the contracts post-August 2023. A business case was developed by the Department in collaboration with Ernst & Young to appraise options for the delivery of health assessments from August 2023. A long list of options, 25 options for the future direction of health assessments, were developed. These included a range of areas from in-housing options, outsourcing options, a phased in-housing approach, and indeed a pilot in-housing service. An event was also held with key external stakeholders from the advice sector to present the long list of options in October 2020 and seek their feedback on the future delivery of the service. A shortlisting exercise was then carried out using 5 criteria: delivering objectives of the new programme, the strategic fit, the affordability, the feasibility, and the risk, and 5 options scored the highest. The outcome of the business case was that outsourcing to a single provider presented the least cost of £93 million less than in-housing the service. The main reasons for in-housing being more expensive is the tuition of existing assessment provider staff, as well as significant upfront investment costs and setup costs. The business case also concluded that to mitigate the risk of service disruption, partnerships delivery with health trusts, and indeed in collaboration with the Department of Health, was critical. The Department of Health advised that it is not possible to partner with DFC to jointly deliver health assessments in-house or joint pilot health assessments in-house in advance or before 2028. However, officials did discuss a potential future partnership for delivery of health assessments from 2028 or earlier if that's feasible. Minister has exchanged letters with Minister Swan and has requested a meeting to discuss and agree a programme of work with a view to commencing the implementation of an in-house model on a phased basis. Due to in-housing costs being an additional £93 million, and that in a partnership with the Department of Health is not feasible with the department has had no option but to proceed at this time with joining the DWP procurement as a separate geographical lot. We will be known as Lot 5. A single provider, and that will be for a single provider to deliver services with a range of significant improvements from August 2023. This procurement is expected to commence on the 12th of November this year. I can confirm that the Minister is committed to implementing a partnership delivery approach with the Department of Health as soon as this is practically feasible and possible to do. And she has ensured that in the new proposals in the new contract, which are written into the contractual arrangements, that there is a clause in the single provider contract to either terminate that contract with 12 months notice and fully in-house the service, or partially terminate the contract with 12 months notice to pilot in-house the in-housing of the service should we be able to do this before that. Chair and members, thank you very much for your time this morning. And I'm sure Mickey and I are very happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Linda, and thank you very much, Mickey. Because I'm in the hot seat today, I'm going to take advantage, but if any members want to raise their hands, Andy's in like a shot. Andy, I'm going to ask you to keep your questions a bit quicker this time. Folks, thank you very much. Okay, you've given us a lot there, and thank you very much for that. Mickey, I'll go back to you. You talked about the NIPSO report and the fact that there are 33 recommendations being considered and the action plan is due to come forward. At this stage, do you know how many of those 33 recommendations are being considered, or is it just too early for that yet?
I'm sure. Well, we're considering all the recommendations, all 33 recommendations. What we're working through at the moment is the feasibility of the recommendations. Some of them would entail changes to IT systems, and as the members will be well aware, we use DWP IT systems to administer all our benefits. However, that doesn't mean that that's not doable or not practical. So we're just working through all the detail of that at the moment and preparation for delivering an action plan to the Ombudsman's office in time for the end of the calendar year. But as part of that work, we're engaging regularly, and we've had a few meetings with the investigation team who led on the NIPSO report. So we're continuing to speak and work through that detail.
Can I ask as well, we're expecting to see the disability strategy, aren't we, by the end of the year? Is there any of those recommendations being filtered through to that expert panel to link those two together?
Yeah, well, as part of the co-design group met recently, and I, as one of the officials, I'm not leading on the disability strategy, but officials were attended the recent meeting of the co-design group to talk about recommendations that were potentially coming forward, and the NIPSO report was mentioned in that discussion.
Okay, that would be good to see that tying across. I have a few quick questions on this and then I will be opening up to the floor. So members, anybody else? I've got Andy in the room who wants to ask questions. Anybody else online if you want to raise your hands? Just have a few quick ones. So the in-house audits, I absolutely welcome. I think that anybody who marks their own homework, it's not a good idea to do that. I am very concerned, I have to say, about the complaints process, and I'll ask a question here because I do not believe in one way, shape or form that the process that we have in Northern Ireland gets 100% customer satisfaction, and having provided services for people with disabilities, timing is key. So I will ask you, you see when those customer surveys are done, are they done after the PIP assessment but before the award is made?
So I'll take that one, Chair. Yes, one of the things that happens, they happen immediately after because they happen at the end of where Capita's involvement in the process ends, and that's before it transfers back to the department. At the moment, 100% of those surveys are done immediately after, and they're done pre-award. One of the recommendations from our own independent review and across, they've come through in the NIPSO review, actually subsequently after our review, is that we should split those. We should take a view from our customers immediately after, yes, but also immediately after the assessment process, but also at the very end after award review. And that is one of the recommendations that we have put forward, that we will be slightly different from the DWP procurement. It's one of our recommendations. It's something that we will be doing differently from the mainland. We will be assessing some 50% of our clients after assessment review from Capita, and we're also proposing to do 50%, so we get a whole life view on the process from the customer or the other claimant that's trying to go through that process. So that is one of the proposals. It's recognised, Chair, as one of the an issue that we have recognised in the department ourselves, and it's something that we are trying to address through this new process and proposed process in the new contract.
Glad to hear that, Linda, because I'm very concerned, and I haven't provided services for people with many different types of disabilities in the past, when they think that responding to a customer survey in a negative way might have an impact on the outcome of the decision, even though it may not, is something that forces a higher satisfaction rate. So I'm glad to hear that the department has recognised that. A couple of other questions then. In the presentation that I'm sure you heard from Capita themselves, they had talked about the fact that the department now looks at those 25% that are decided in-house before they go to Capita. I'm assuming then that will be an increase in a percentage of assessments that the department will be handling going forward, because more of those assessments will be for people who have been through the PIP process and then can be assessed in-house. So I'm just wondering, how's the department going to cope with that increase percentage? So if it goes from 25% to 35% or 45% are being decided before it goes to Capita, how will the department deal with that? Oh, sorry, Mickey, you're on silent.
Sorry, yeah. Sorry, we have resources in place for case managers to determine decisions. We're just at the start of this process in terms of looking at awards that can be decided but they do have the sufficient evidence. It's the beginning of that process. The process at the moment shows that of those award reviews, I know we've talked about the figure. That figure is 25% of all assessments being conducted, but it's about 50% of award reviews actually aren't going through the assessment process at the moment. And I think if you look back as well at the figures I quoted earlier, about 80% of award reviews are for more than 5 years. The tendency is more to have long-term awards rather than short-term awards. So therefore, I don't see a resource issue in dealing with these.
Okay, thank you. That I was sort of expecting that as the answer, so that's good to hear. Just asking, there was something come up in the presentation as well where I had asked a question about mandatory reconsideration, where an application is scored 0, but through mandatory reconsideration the person is then awarded PIP or the higher rate of PIP. Capita don't seem to get feedback on those mandatory reconsiderations, where there's a complete difference between what their people have awarded and what through mandatory reconsideration is done. Is there any plans to take the learning from that through to Capita to see why there's such a differential?
Yeah, well, Chair, can I just pick up on that as well? We would look at, most, and it's back to the evidence gathering issue again, most mandatory reconsiderations similar to, some of the other outcomes are because of new evidence being provided. So I think part of the learning of all this is around how can we front load the evidence at the start of the process, if you know what I mean. So that's part of it. If you know what I mean, the evidence would suggest that we do need this work to be done on learning, I think, right across the feedback loops. Some of the learning from the reconsideration decisions and all that is picked up as part of the quality fora that we would have Capita in the round, if you know what I mean, because the same issue seems to be as the gathering of the evidence, which has actually came out strongly in the Ombudsman's investigation and some of the other reports as well, and has come out and is part of the consultation on the health and disability written paper. So it's all around this theme of evidence gathering and how we can get evidence in at the earliest part of the process, and probably in a streamlined and a simplified way without increasing additional pressures on the health service.
Thank you. I was just wondering, I want to tie into something that has happened more recently. In Northern Ireland, we now have the Victims Payment Board, and they have a process in place where they can get the evidence and the person who's applying doesn't have to then go and seek that. Is there any discussions with the Victims Payment Board and how they can do that and how that could perhaps be put into the future delivery of PIP?
Yeah. Well, what I would say is that it may be the victims' payments and the PIP legislation, the benefits are constructed on different legislation and different application and interpretation of the evidence, if you mean. I think where there's no assessment process as such, if you mean, so there's smaller volumes in terms of that as well, as allows them to cope with that particular workload.
Yeah, I'm just wondering then about it's how they're able to access the evidence. If in-house, say for instance, the department knows and has people who can identify that there's evidence needed, instead of having this red tape circle where they tell the applicant then goes to their doctors and it takes whatever length of time to get it from their GP or the trust, and then it goes back. If we could cut out the middlemen on that, it would save a lot of time. The other thing, just two more questions for me.
Go ahead, Chair.
Sorry, two more questions for me. Royal College of Occupational Therapists, I met with them in the last couple of months, and I have to say it was quite enlightening, some of their information that they provided. Now, we know there aren't enough occupational therapists in Northern Ireland, but their training, and they do consider the physical, psychological, social and environmental situation that a person is in. I'm just wondering, is there anything intended in the future delivery of PIP that OT type training, or an increase in the number of OTs? Because we could say, for instance, a nurse or a doctor, fantastically qualified people, brilliant clinicians, but to be faced with the range of disabilities that we have, I'm just wondering if that OT whole person model is a better type of assessment skill set.
I'm going to let Linda just going to come in there.
I suppose, sorry, apologies, Chair.
I think, Mickey, if you put yourself on mute. Oh, there we go.
Hello.
Hello, Linda. Hiya.
Hello, Chair.
Yes, you can. We can hear you. Yeah.
Do you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
Basically, the occupational therapists are already engaged within the PIP process and in the clinical process at the moment. In terms of accessing, they are accessing that function already, which Capita obviously provide a range of different clinicians and different services. So OT is covered within that functional assessment piece already, and it's something, but it's certainly something we can pick up in terms of engaging directly with the Royal College of Occupational Therapists, and we can pick it up directly with Capita. I suppose in the clinicianal side, they don't have specialists per se undertaking the assessments. They actually have someone there that does a range of assessments across a range of functional issues, because generally speaking, people don't turn up for assessments with one particular issue. They have multiple issues. And what they do in their assessment process to date is that they do go back, and if there's a specialist requirement around OT or in any of those clinical fields, they will engage with those specialists. Capita have those across the piece that they engage with already. But certainly very happy, Chair, to pick up that particular recommendation with the Royal College, if you think that would be helpful as well, directly as a department.
That would be amazing, Linda. It's just the fact that when you talk about someone's mental health or a learning disability, they may be able to pick up a kettle and make a cup of tea, but if you ask them why they're picking up the kettle, that may not come forward. Someone may be able to walk 200 yards, but they may be cause serious harm to themselves because their awareness, spatial awareness, or awareness of danger isn't there. So that I would really appreciate if that consideration was made with occupational therapists. My final thing is on the contract. We know that the Minister's intention was to bring the service in-house, but you're saying to us now that a single source contract provider in Lot 5 will be brought forward, so it's not actually coming in-house. I'm just wondering, how's this going forward then? Because it sort of goes against what the Minister had intended. We need executive approval. I'm assuming we need executive approval, and that hasn't been secured yet on whatever it's going to be in the future. So where does this leave the plans? And we're going forward now for a 3-year budget, which will cross over that August 2023 period. Have you guys got bids in, or have you been asked for bids in to handle whatever's going to happen after 2023 with this single source contract? And we're very aware there are a limited number of companies out there who can do this work, so potentially we may be looking at a Capita, or even our Capita, being awarded that contract again. I'm just wondering if you could just tease out with that what's going to happen after 2023 then.
Thank you, Chair. I'll pick up on a couple of those. I suppose going back to the Minister's aspiration, I think we are still very clear that is the direction of travel we are going in. But if we put in context, across all of the assessment services, we assess about 130,000 assessments per year, which is about £2 billion of benefits to people and citizens that we're trying to serve. I think when the big challenge is under the in-housing element, which is why we were not able to take it forward as a preferred option at this time, was there is significant upfront costs and also time and issues about putting in place, for example, a brand new IT system. One of the challenges you've mentioned is that there's very few operators in the market, and there is. And that's because the barriers to entry into a contract like this are quite substantial. The IT at the moment is owned by our current incumbent providers, so Capita and ATOS and other providers in the mainland actually provide that IT service to ourselves. As part of the procurement, we've kicked up a parallel procurement is running parallel to the new one that's planned on the 12th of November for this assessment service, and that's about bringing our own IT in-house with DWP. So DWP are going through a contract to commission a brand new IT service that we will then have a subcontract from. Part of that also is around bringing, setting up, securing additional estate to do that, recruiting new staff and shipping staff over from the existing contract, all of none which could be achieved by 2023. The other thing that our assessment actually undertook was, to transfer over what at the moment from the current contract to what we currently have. There is challenges and there's improvements that we want to make, and we feel that we want to transform that service. A key part of that is a relationship with the Department of Health, and that is, and just to put in a wee bit of context and issues around that. Obviously, the Department of Health have major challenges at the moment trying to deal with, obviously, the COVID-19 pandemic and the recovery of that, but also, obviously, the vaccination programme, etc. In terms of moving forward, in terms of further medical evidence and even getting access to that, as officials, we are working and we have been in contact with Department of Health officials around getting access, for example, to their new contract, which is out at the moment for our hospital services, etc., which will be focusing for the next 5 years on trying to develop a system that can collect and join up all of the hospitals and all of the medical information in that. And we are trying as officials to shape our future requirements under health assessments in that contract, and indeed we'd want to pursue that with the Department of Health as we go. In terms of the bidders, just to share, we as officials have, since the Minister gave approval on the 25th of May to join this procurement, we have been actively involved in pre-market engagement with private sector investors that are interested in bidding for this contract. And we've built in a number of things into the Northern Ireland arrangements that will give us as best an opportunity to secure as best a provider for this market. We have things that are not applied to Northern Ireland that are applying to all of the other providers, for example, in the mainland, like a market limiter, which means that they will not be restricting the opportunities, and that's to try and ensure that we get as best a provider as we can to deliver these services as we go forward. In terms of the Minister, I just want to say, in terms of the Minister's intention, we have started that journey. There has been a significant movement whenever we designed for the extension contracts on the 25th of, and the Minister gave the decision on the 25th of May this year. We already agreed that in the 2-year period that we were going to focus on a number of improvements, and those are included in your briefing paper, members, today in Annex A, I think it is. And we are going to be focusing on those improvements with the likes of Capita and ATOS in the next 2 years, so we will not be sitting still, we will not be complacent around some of the challenges and issues we have. There is longer term changes that are required in this contract, and we certainly have already fed in July this year a number of Northern Ireland differences, things around human rights, things around equality, things around that are very prevalent and that have come from our Minister and her views, and also from the public and the feedback that we have. And we have a number of very bespoke changes in that contract which we are requesting, and those will be in the contract on the 12th of November as we go forward. This project will require transformation, and we as a department are on a journey in this transformation. It's something that we want to do as officials to change how we deliver this project as we go forward, and we do need to put those building blocks in place now to do that. So Chair, I feel that we are delivering what the Minister wants at the moment, and I think she is very clear and has always been very clear with us as officials as to the direction of travel that needs to take.
Thank you very much. I'm going to move over to others.
In terms of the other thing, we will also try and move the IT service, just to say that we won't have to wait to 2028 perhaps to make some of the changes that we want to make. So, for example, the IT will be awarded in 2023. We will be transitioning to a new IT service in 2024. So we can start to remove some of those barriers to entry from 2025 onwards in terms of managing this contract. And that will be a real enabler for us to go forward into the future, because we will have the IT system ourselves. as we go forward, and which will be a key enabler for us to in-house as we go forward into the future.
Thank you, Linda. I'm going to move over now to Andy. If anyone else wants to indicate to me that they want to speak or ask questions, please raise your hand. Andy, but over to you.
Thanks, Vice Chair. Thanks, Linda and Mickey, for your overview. And at the outset, Mickey, can I place on record my thanks to yourself, because I am sure every time you see my name come through in your email or your phone, you know exactly what it is, but yourself and your team have always been very helpful with any queries I've had on behalf of constituents, so I'd like to place that on record. Linda, in terms of disability assessors, did I catch you right when you said that Capita currently have 139 disability assessors?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and do the department have any information on how many assessments are conducted each month by Capita?
Hello, Linda.
Andy, it's about 3,500 assessments per month.
So 3,500 assessments per month. They have 139 disability assessors. So Capita have very helpfully provided a graph for us in terms of the complaint statistics. And I appreciate you don't have this, but if we take, for example, August, 4,052, and if you break that down over 31 days in August, roughly gives you 131 assessments per day. But Capita told us that their assessors were carrying out 3 per day. Can you detail what the what the department understands as when a assessment is closed? Is that when the report is handed over to the department?
Yes, we determine a report when it's handed over to the department. We consider that case then closed. Yes. And just to reaffirm, yes, Capita's delivery is normally about 3, on average, 3 for their experienced assessors, 3 assessments per day.
Okay. Interesting. And sorry, I know you've gone through some of the improvements and the intended improvements moving forward. Are you able to categorise, I think we asked for this in written format, all of the improvements?
Sorry, Chair, we're not hearing anything that Andy, you're saying. Apologies.
So I'm just asking, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now, Linda?
Can you hear us now, Linda? Hello?
Hello.
Hello,
Chair?
sorry, Linda. Hi, can you hear us now?
Yes, we can, Chair. Thank you.
Sorry, Andy, go on ahead.
Thanks, Linda. I'll just ask you a question around improvements, and you've detailed some of the improvements as you move forward. Are you able to detail all improvements? And it might be that you need to provide this in writing, because I'm sure there's been a number of them, all improvements that have been implemented to date.
Yes, Chair, just through the Chair, Andy, those are actually, we've included a list of the improvements in the last couple of years, and they have a briefing report for today. And we're happy to provide further back if that would be helpful, but we've included just a briefing. I think it's an Annex A of the briefing report.
Okay, and in terms of the approach or the desire to get to the full house implementation of assessments, how achievable is this? I see obviously in the document you provided that Health have stated that they can't achieve that before 2028, but how achievable is it beyond then?
In terms of the, we are certainly going to, obviously maintaining and safeguarding the existing service we have is quite critical. The volume and the importance of getting the benefits out to the key people and the citizens and the claimants that are applying for this benefit are paramount. So what we have through the extension of this contract is safety, in that we do have a provision of a service to 2028. We are very clear that running parallel to that, we will be looking at how we in-house that service. We estimated before and looked at in-housing timeframes around this, and we believe if we have a partnership in place, we can in-house this service in roughly about 3.5 to 4 years. We need the IT, and that will be quite critical to have that in place. and the IT will be awarded the contract in 2024 and will be started to be initially rolled out in 2025. We believe that if we can engage with the Department of Health, we can move that forward quickly, or more quicker than what we have. If not, we will have to be reliant, obviously, on that relationship in terms of access to medical records and also healthcare physicians, etc. as well. So, are we comfortable? I think it depends on the engagement with the Department of Health. I think if we have that relationship, we can move that forward. We think the time frame for implementing estates, the IT system, all of that is a 3.5-year time frame, and I suppose we'll be better positioned in 2025 to do that. And in 2025, when we get the new IT system, we've already planned into our work to actually have to undertake a new outline business case to have a look at that. The other thing, I think, Kelly, I think you asked as chair, was this built into the budgets? And yes, we obviously have built this and planned this into the budget projections with Gavin and Sherry, obviously, and the department's directors of finance. The other thing I would say to you is we have done a bit of benchmarking as part of this exercise. Andy, back to your query around our confidence around this, and I suppose we have looked at the likes of the Scottish model actually as part of this, and the Scottish Government around their implementation of the new adult disability payment, which they're hoping to bring in, which is obviously one element or one type of benefit and a change in the benefit system. And I suppose they initially started out this process by the Scottish Social Security Agency in 2016, and obviously they're hoping to roll that out in 2022. So these things do take considerable time to plan and ensure that we do have them right before we can roll them out to the general public. The other thing I would say to you is requirements will also require us to enhance the levels of staff we have at the moment. And just to say that our own team at the minute, we have about 32 staff that work on this particular project. And just to bring that into context, and when we did a comparison with the likes of the Scottish Assembly and their requirements to bring in an benefit similar to this, they have a scale of about 650 staff involved in designing and implementing that new benefit. So if we are going to do this, it's going to require substantial resource and substantial increase in the staff numbers and things we have now. But all obviously keen to take those forward and bring those forward as we work through that particular process, members, if that's helpful.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And just very quickly to touch on the 93 million figure that you quote in your briefing document. See that cost for that would be more for an in-house service at this point. Is that a one-off upfront cost more so for the IT system and the pay of staff?
So it'll be it is two things. One of them is obviously there is a large upfront cost, Andy, around the IT system in particular, and also then the initial setup costs. But yes, the TUPE costs will be real costs. So for example, the additional costs per staff member is roughly about 5% to bring that member of staff into the civil service per se, which they would be. You're looking at probably an increase of costs around 30%. So those will be ongoing costs on an annual basis. And those are costs that we will have to meet on an annual basis to bring it in-house. So
an extra 30% to deliver an in-house service in comparison with an outsourced service?
An extra 25%. The current private sector providers have about 5%. But when you bring someone, and you'll appreciate this, into the civil service, you'll have pensionable costs, you'll have other costs that we have to meet, and they're roughly about 25% more. So we've done a bit of a calculation around that, and that's with the additional costs. And that's really what makes up the substance, is the staffing cost, and that initial upfront cost is the £93 million extra.
And what level of staffing are you talking? Do you have any?
We have based that on 100. Sorry, apologies for talking over you there. We've based that on 140 staff. That's what we've based that on.
Okay, so that would be health assessors.
No, it's a mixture of health assessors, and it's also a mixture of obviously core staff that's required to actually run the programme. Whenever we deliver the service with Capita at the moment, the health assessment team are one part of it. There is about a further between 20 and 25% what we call overhead staff costs that we also cover in the contract, and we would have to actually cover those additional costs as well.
So the department's service would have less disability assessors than what Capita currently have at this moment in time?
Well, we would have similar health assessors. Well, potentially yes, but we would also have a clinicianal team as already we have at the moment. We have already 14 staff, or 18 staff actually in total, if you can include the overhead staff within the health assessment team as well. So we would have probably a total of 158. Yeah. But what I will say to you, Andy, is that we are going to undertake an OBC on this. Those were done at January this year. We would be undertaking an outline business case again when we were in we are definitely planning to do one in 2025 whenever the IT system and that is up and running, where we will review those costs again and make sure. But certainly the figures for example, Scottish Social Security and that are figures that have been realised to us probably post our own review. So we are probably very minimalistic in terms of the approach that we have looked. We try to look at could we do this as efficiently as we can, and I think the costs that are in front of you are what I would call the least cost scenario at this point.
No, absolutely. I would like to better understand though, of those 140 that you referenced, and I know we're speaking ahead of time because obviously we don't have an in-house service, how many of those actually would be disability assessors?
We would obviously need to, there would be obviously a few things. Obviously there'd be about, in terms of the CHIPI, we'd also have to CHIPI over staff from the existing providers. Mm-hmm. So the 140 staff would be a mixture of additional staff that we would take on board, and then also some of the professional staff that oversee the contract. But we would be looking probably initially to do probably estimates around 300 staff being CHIPI'd over as well in addition to that. Sorry, I should have said that.
So as well. You'd look to achieve the same level of disability assessors that is currently being delivered through Capita at 139?
Sorry, apologies, I've obviously caused a little bit of confusion. The 140 staff that we would be bringing in are to design and implement the brand new service that we would want to bring in. The staff that we would require to deliver the disability service as we go forward is 300 staff. We believe we'd need at least 300 disability assessors and that to deliver that service as we go forward.
Okay, so the department believes they need 300 disability assessors, but Capita only currently have 139.
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that.
So you'd said 300 disability assessors within a department delivered service, but Capita only have 139. Why the huge difference?
Because we would be delivering, we would not be just looking at Capita in this. Capita is one provider. We have two providers and we have multiple benefits that we actually run and deliver services for. If we were bringing this in-house, we would be looking at a service that was going to be basically able to support all of those, including ESSA and UC and all of our other benefits. So the Capita staff would be one element of that. We would also be looking at obviously the ATOS contract and the UC and the ESSA and all the other benefits and the staffing around that as well. We would need to be able to cover all of those benefits as an in-house service. Okay.
And just in terms of, when we heard from Capita, they mentioned about a low uptake of the audio recorded assessments. Has there been any work done with the department in conjunction with Capita to try to encourage the uptake of the audio assessments?
Yes, so we've done quite a bit of work on this. We've actually did quite a bit of review of all of the channel works that we have undertaken. So we have looked at telephony, we've looked at our, obviously we have done face-to-face, and obviously we introduced telephony at pace to undertake, I suppose, assessments for us post-March 2020 onwards. And we did a bit of an assessment around each of those. Hello?
Hello. Yes,
sorry,
we're still here.
We have done some assessment work around, or review work and evaluations of that. We have found a good mixture and uptake, for example, across telephony assessments. We found about 49% of those we reviewed quite like the telephony assessments. There's about 24% would prefer, I think, to retain the face-to-face. But I think in terms of the video assessments, it's not something we can ask people mandatory to opt into at this point in time. It is a voluntary optional service. But I'll maybe bring Mickey in actually to sort of build on this side.
The independent reviews. One of the independent reviews that Marie Kavanagh actually recommended that the process should be, people should be opted in unless they opt out, if you know what I mean. So we're working through that at the moment. If you mean, that would be quite a simple solution and a straightforward solution. unfortunately as well, we're just sort of working through the issues around the compliance with the GDPR regulations to ensure that one of the requirements is the person must give informed consent, and it must be an informed position. And there's concern that are they fully consenting to that if they feel it's absolutely, they must do it as part of the process rather than an option within it. So there's a fine line just to be treaded here between ensuring that, because I think back to the complaints information, some of the issues around complaints is about what actually took place at the assessment. So I think if we had audio recording in a wider sense, it would help it, but we need to ensure that if we do mandate it, inverted commas, that people do ensure that it's an informed consent, and that GDPR rules and regulations require us to do that.
No, I appreciate that, Mickey. And just earlier on, you'd mentioned in relation to the DWP Green Paper about the department assessing a cohort of those who won't have to undergo an assessment. Are you able to elaborate any more on that in terms of what criteria the department will be looking at to consider that cohort of people?
No, I think, Andy, that's part of the development work that's ongoing in the design of the policy at the moment. The Green Paper is a consultation paper. My understanding of how the policy process works is it translates then into a white paper, if you mean, where the government is actually bringing forward proposals, either a regulatory change or even other changes. So I would expect probably, I don't know in terms of the parliamentary timetable across the water, to see a white paper probably sometime next year, which would detail some of the detail around this, of which people may not be taken forward. But I suppose in many ways, some of the changes that have been made, the progressive condition stuff is a step towards that, if you know what I mean, in terms of not reviewing people unnecessarily. And I think they'll be looking to see where else that may apply and may be appropriate.
Totally. And three final questions. One, Mickey, how many decision makers does the department currently have?
The department probably has around about 90 decision makers. There's over probably about 200 and probably 40 staff in the centre in totality, which cover a wide range of activities. So there's about 90 case managers at the moment, decision makers.
So 90 to deal with about 3,500 assessment reports, give or take.
Yeah.
Not a great ratio.
When we find that in terms of, the qualitative work that we measure the quality internally as well, Andy, just like Capita do, the senior decision makers who monitor quality on an ongoing basis as well. So the quality of the decisions that we find is good, if you know what I mean, and also as well, as I mentioned or referenced earlier, the internal clinicians in the department are available as well to provide help and advice for the decision makers.
That was my next question. How many internal clinicians are there?
I'll let Linda deal with that just in terms of the numbers.
Okay, we currently there will be 14 clinicians, and there will be 4 staff that support those clinicians. That the team will be 18 in total, Andy, so 14 clinicians. At the moment we have 6.
Okay. There's
so
only
8
6
more.
clinicians
We just recruited
at the
8
moment?
more at the end of September there.
Okay. And Mickey, back to yourself, sorry, see in terms of the decision makers, is there a standard person specification for that? What is the qualification for a decision maker? Is there certain qualifications required?
Oh, Mickey, I think you're on silent.
Yeah, there's no qualifications such, Andy, in terms of, but what we do actually is, as I said earlier, PIP replaced DLA, and there was a number of staff moved across who were experienced decision makers in DLA. In addition to that, all those decision makers and any new ones we recruited as well all undergo a 5-week training course, which includes extensive training on both the eligibility criteria, but also in the weighting and assessment and consideration of evidence. As well as that, similar to you'd have heard in the Capita presentation, those people actually have to go through a qualitative process before we sort of sign them off effectively. So the senior case managers who monitor their decisions, and they have to have a number, I think it's 5, signed off correctly before we actually then stop monitoring. And then in addition to that, but we just don't stop the monitoring at that stage, we will dipstick at regular intervals to continue to ensure that the standards of decisions are accurate.
Okay, and I promise these are the last 2, Chair.
I have to say, we'll need to maintain
the standardised evidential form that you're talking about that's currently in development for GPs, is there a time frame on that? And also, how will the department try to ensure, maybe not compliance, but a good uptake in terms of GPs returning those to Capita?
Well, I think in terms of we're just working through the time frame at that and with Capita at the moment, and probably, you know, as I think with all IT changes and all those things, it'll probably take us into the start of next year at the earliest. I think what we would probably had hoped to have been maybe more advanced now, but the pilot that we had been planned was paused due to COVID and the impacts of that. Notwithstanding that, I think the uptake will be actually the proof of the pudding will be in the eating. I think if we have a simpler form which GPs can draw down automatically from their records rather than actually go and researching clerical records, and I think some of the discussions we've had with the BMA and the Royal College would indicate that, I think, and they've been involved with some of the design work on the form, that should actually help the uptake levels.
No, absolutely. And last question, in terms of the quality audit assessment, I know we discussed this several months ago, Mickey, when we met, and thanks for that. Why did the department only feel now was the appropriate time to bring that in-house? You know, given what Capita said earlier on about the mark your own homework aspect of it, why not sooner?
I suppose we've always, I want to be clear, we've always had a robust evaluation process in place with Capita. It's been in place since May 2017. And whilst Capita undertake the assessment, it is done independently by Wyman Dillon, and it is provided, it's really, to be honest with you, as an output of a contract that we pay on, but it is undertaken by Wyman Dillon. In terms of our own view, I suppose, yes, a number of reviews identified, the perception of that, more so than anything else, could be perceived as marking your own homework, and it probably does be seen to be that way. For us, we were quite keen to take that control back in-house, and I think it also helps us challenge, enables us to challenge more robustly those queries and conversations and things we have around the clinical aspects or the functional aspects that are being commented on. I think for us it also means that we have a statistical sample around, apologies, I don't know my camera's just off, apologies about that, I don't know why. I think in terms of one of the things that we're quite keen to get to is a statistical valid sample. When you are undertaking, we have been undertaking a number of clinical audits. We have a good sample, and it enables us to give a sense of how things are going. I would like, on behalf of the department, to have a more statistical valid sample, and I think what we have now is, we will have as we go forward, is the statistical valid sample, and a much more robust assurance around the process and of this project and this programme and this contract.
Not a problem. Thanks to both yourself, Linda, and yourself, Mickey.
Are you all done then, Andy? Yes, thank you, sorry. Ciara, I'm going to bring you in now. Ciara Ferguson.
Okay. Nice to meet you, Linda and Mickey, and thank you very much. It's a very detailed and comprehensive overview of obviously the work you've been doing and demonstrating the Minister's policy intent to bring about the assessment in-house, and obviously the detailed business case that you've undertook, the 25 options. So, and very much, and you've clearly outlined the challenges regarding upfront cost, capacity, the IT system, and obviously it is a joined up approach is required moving forward with the Department of Health and liaison with the Department of Health. Obviously 2028 is probably the earliest, in the sense of how we can collaboratively work together and improve and continue to improve. With relation to the improvements made, I very much welcome obviously the ongoing work this past year. You're trying to kind of maximise reducing the paper-based, reducing it from 48 pages to 16, which is very welcome, and creating a greater choice as well for people. The key questions for me is regarding around the quality assurance. And obviously I welcome the improvement as well in relation to your health advisors and your clinicians in relation to extending the team from 3 to 6 and obviously to 14, hopefully with 4 staff very soon. And that'll create like a 400% increase in the number of audits that you can do in-house, which is fantastic. In relation to that team, the first question is obviously, Mickey, you did mention regarding mental health as a huge issue and a condition that obviously individuals are faced with in coming forward. So in relation to the team, with regards to that being taken into consideration with the health advisory team, and then obviously this is going to be transformational and it's going to take time. So I was interested to know, secondly, regarding the DWP IT system, is there going to be, with relation to a pilot to it, I know you mentioned 2023 probably, is there going to be any pilots done prior to that? And I suppose finally, just would both of you agree that changing this assessment process needs to be introduced in a really careful and managed way to ensure that people assessing their entitlements, nothing is taken away from them at those moments, and they're not going to be disadvantaged as a result of it. So it will take very much time, but it's time that's worthwhile and needs to be done properly.
Okay, so maybe starting with the first, yes, I think in terms of the approach that we proposed, whilst people would like to see this happening sooner, I think the thing we set out was at the core of the department's delivery is these most vulnerable customers and the £2 billion worth of benefits that we need to get out to these people, and we have to ensure that the safeguarding of that service is paramount and at the front of everything we do, which is why we are not ram-standing into a brand new way of doing things. There is a considered way. We've looked at this quite robustly for the last year on behalf of the Minister to make sure that we get a way forward that is correct and that is right. We are looking at the IT system, which you mentioned specifically. So just to give members a little bit of background, we are currently involved in a pilot or involved in a team that's overseeing or reviewing a pilot at the moment in Tresco in South East England, which is looking at how can we grow the IT, how can we scale the IT to ensure that it is fit for purpose, that it's going to meet our future requirements, and it's going to be able to do what we need it to do as we go forward into the future. The phased rollout of that is happening. So we have a Tresco site at the moment, which is in South East England. In November, they have just moved to a new site in Birmingham, and they're hoping to have a much more national rollout of that pilot in 2025 going forward. So that will be coming forward, we envisage, to Northern Ireland during that time period. So that will give us some assurity around the IT, the functionality of it, and making sure that we do that in a very careful and a very managed way. In terms of the team of clinicians so we have recruited people, the 8 people we've come from a mixture of backgrounds and a mixture of experiences. The team have come in with an array of clinical experiences and backgrounds, including mental health. We have one particular person that's very focused around the mental health aspects of it. All previous experience, they all have previous experience in health and disability assessments processes. So they will be coming in with that knowledge and that expertise into the department, except they'll be sitting on this side of the table, looking out as opposed to the other way around, providing assessments to us. In terms of, I think those are the 2 main questions here that you'd asked. But in terms of, yes, I think given the sensitivity, the vulnerability, the importance of ensuring continuity of benefit provision services payments, and given that this is a service that that is very publicly commented on a regular basis, we want to make sure that we take this in a step-by-step process to make sure we try and get it as best we can for whatever we're trying to produce as we go forward into the future. And as I say, in Northern Ireland times, we are not going with the blanket DWP procurement. We have absolutely fed in the whole human rights agenda, the whole equality agenda, things that are very specific to the Northern Ireland setting into that, and those are reflected in the new contract as it goes forward. We have been engaging with the private sector on those particular elements, so we're hoping that some of those changes and some of those reflections on how the service is delivered from 2023 onwards will be reflected in the new contract provision. So we are trying to manage it as best we can and focus as best we can to make sure we get the best type of service, quality service for the clients and the claimants that we're trying to work with. Maybe do you want to say anything else?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. No other members have indicated at this stage. So Mickey and Linda, you've given us quite a lot of information today, and thank you for that. But for today, I'm sure we'll be speaking to you very soon. But for today, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, members. I know that we've had quite a lot today, but I'll move on now because we're a bit tight for time to agenda item number 9, which is SL1 Social Security Information Sharing in relation to Welfare Services, etc. Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2021. Members, a copy of the SL1 is at page 32. The proposed rule will amend the Social Security information sharing in relation to welfare services, etc. Northern Ireland 2016 regulations to allow for the sharing of data between the qualifying persons, which include the Northern Ireland Housing Executive and registered housing associations. Members, anyone any comments on this SL1, or if you're content for the department to make the rule?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Content. So
we're content for that rule to go forward. Thank you very much. Moving on then to agenda item 10, which is SR 2021 /287, the Social Security Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2021. Members, a copy of the rule is at page 37 of your pack. Members, have you any objections to the rule?
No.
No, assuming there's no objections, shaking heads everywhere. So I'm going to put the question that the Committee for Communities has considered SR 2021 /287, the Social Security Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2021, and, subject to the Examiner of Statutory Rules report, has no objection to the rule. Agreed?
Yeah.
Agenda item 11, correspondence. Members, the correspondence memo is at page 43 of your pack. I draw your attention to correspondence from Leonard Cheshire at page 45 of the pack with a request to brief the committee regarding concerns around the lack of accommodation in the community and bed blocking for people with an alcohol-related brain injury. Members, are we agreed to invite them to a future stakeholder event? Yeah, agreed?
Yeah, good.
Also on page 252 of the pack, there's an invitation from the National Museums Northern Ireland to visit the Ulster Folk and Transport Museum and Ulster Transport Museum at Cultra, including the opportunity to hold an external meeting at one of their sites. Members, are we agreed that we note this invitation for now and consider it again early in 2022 once we are further through our bills? Agreed. It would be nice to get. It'd be nice to get out of Parliament buildings, but I'm afraid we're a little busy at this stage. Could I also draw your attention to correspondence at page 253, which is asking for the Chair and the Deputy Chair to meet with the National Lottery Community Fund in Northern Ireland to discuss the role the fund can play in helping local communities to emerge from the pandemic. Our members agreed that we go on ahead and arrange to meet with them on the committee's behalf.
Yep.
Agreed, thank you very much. Members on Starleaf, have you anything you want to bring up in correspondence for the attention of the committee? Or members in the room?
No.
No. Very good, thank you very much. So members, are you content to action the correspondence as set out in the correspondence memo? Yep. Agreed, thank you very much. Members, just on the forward work programme, just to let you know that next week we will have training session, where have I put that wee note, on members' questions. So we'll be having that next week, just to highlight that to you. I know that some members will have gone through this before, but it's always good to have refreshers on training, just to make sure that we are providing a good scrutiny role. Members, at the meeting on the 11th of November, we will continue our deliberations on the clauses of the charity bill. Is that okay? We'll all be ready for that and you'll bring your bill papers. Hopefully we'll have that report through from the department. Just moving then on to agenda item 13, which is any other business. I don't have anything notified to me. Anybody else want to bring up anything under any other business? I'm not seeing anybody in the room or in Starleaf indicating at this time. So then I'll move on then to agenda item 14. Committee deliberations on the Charities Bill. Members, at this point of the meeting, we had intended to continue with our deliberations on the Charities Bill. However, as I stated earlier to the Minister, we're not in a position today to continue with deliberations as we're waiting for responses from the department. So this is postponed to next week's meeting. Members, you were provided with papers for this item starting at page 313 in today's pack. These papers will be included in next week's pack. The updated clause by clause evidence summary tables start at page 331. At page 329 is correspondence from Mr Trevor McKee in relation to the Charity Commission. Can I ask members if you have any comments or are you content to note?
Content.
Content to note. Thank you very much, members. I allowed a wee bit more time today on our previous pieces because we weren't able to take that deliberations. I think that the Capita and the department's response on PIP would have been cut a little bit more short, but thank you for that. Next one then is item agenda 15, date, time and location of next meeting is Tuesday. Remember, we're doing Tuesdays at 9 o'clock in the morning in room 30 when we'll continue to take evidence on the private tenancies bill. All right, thank you very much, members. And with that, our committee meeting for today is closed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.